Chapter 1069. In the boundless cloud cave, 6 great celestial emperors surrounded Wu Chang, who was roaring at the top of his voice. Just now, Ziwei Lingying was about to convince Wu Chang, but when he mentioned the emperor of the celestial court, who had imprisoned Wu Chang here many generations ago, Wu Chang suddenly broke out, shouting and cursing at the top of his voice and uttering countless vicious curses. These were not empty curses. Every curse he uttered turned into thick black smoke, condensing into fist-sized black runes that flew all over the sky. The lethality of these curses, which had materialized, was astonishing. Each curse contained boundless evil and malice. The ghostly wails and wolf howls shook the heavens and the earth, and there was also a strange, pungent smell that assaulted the nostrils. The thick smell was so strange that Yi Xia almost threw up when she smelled it. Wu Qi unleashed a beam of Buddhist light that enveloped Yi Xia, isolating the stench from the black runes. Ao Buzan gave Yi Xia a secretive look and murmured in a low voice, "This woman is really troublesome when she has a big belly. She can't eat or drink, and she vomits all day long, losing her temper and beating her husband all the time. If it were not for the fact that Lao Tzu has a strong body, he would have been tortured to death by them." Yi Xia gave Ao Buzan a sidelong glance with her eyes narrowed. Immediately, Ao Buzan straightened his face and looked obediently in Wu Chang's direction, not daring to say another word. Meanwhile, Wu Qi gently rubbed Yi Xia's head and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. Both Yi Xia and Princess Zhanglu were pregnant, which was a big worry for Wu Qi. Suddenly, he regretted bringing Yi Xia to this damned place. If the smell of Wu Chang's curse contained something bad and affected the child in Yi Xia's belly, what should he do? But, Yi Xia and Wu Qi's child was born with the body of a sky fiend, so it should not be easily hurt, right? At the thought of the child in Yi Xia's belly, Wu Qi felt a surge of anger in his heart. Why are you cursing people for no reason? It's fine if you curse a few celestial emperors, but you've provoked me. No matter what kind of immortal body you have, I'll tear you to pieces. As for the 6 great celestial emperors, they had provoked Wu Chang's anger and caused him to curse at random, which was likely to affect Wu Qi's children. They were destined to die a horrible death, and now, they had to die a more painful death. Narrowing his eyes, Wu Qi's pupils shone with an evil gleam. He was about to order Ninetails to pounce out, capture the 6 great celestial emperors, and give Wu Chang a good treatment. But at that moment, Celestial Emperor Zhongji suddenly snapped, "Don't take the opportunity to make trouble, Wu Chang. What's the use of your curse on us? You have less than 1/100th of your cultivation base now. Do you really think you are still the Wu Chang who could seriously injure the 6 great celestial emperors? Cooperate with us, and we can preserve your bloodline. Otherwise, hee." Wu Chang's cursing stopped abruptly. He took a deep breath, inhaled the curse runes drifting in the air, and murmured in a hoarse voice, "Don't ever mention the name of that shameless man in front of me. If not for his temptation, how could I have betrayed the human race? If not for him colluding with Wu Xian to plot against me and seize my immortality herb, how could I have fallen to this state?" He laughed strangely, then said in a low voice, "You said, preserve my bloodline. Don't tell me I still have descendants left in this world." The 6 great celestial emperors, who had laid out a formation to block Wu Chang's curse, exchanged a glance. Then, Great Celestial Emperor Ziwei Lingying said in a deep voice, "When you betrayed the human race, you had 3 sons and 3 daughters. 2 of them were devoured by Wu Xian, and the 3 daughters had their energy essence sucked dry and died. Only the youngest son was left. At that time, I was just an immortal on duty in Temple of Translucence, and my brothers were just ordinary immortals of the Celestial Court," said Great Celestial Emperor indifferently. "Wu Chang," said Great Celestial Emperor Dongji coolly, "I was just an immortal on duty in Temple of Translucence, and my brothers were just ordinary immortals of the Celestial Court." "Wu Chang, we should not be enemies," said Great Celestial Emperor Ziwei Lingying coolly. Wu Chang was silent for a long time. Then, the big face on his chest slowly opened its eyes and grinned strangely. "You've been scheming against me since a long time ago. If that's the case, you should have used my descendants as a bargaining chip to make a deal with me after you ascended to the throne of great celestial emperor. Why did you only come to me today? It's been so many years, but you've only come to see me twice, haven't you? Why did you come to make a deal with me today? Pondering for a short while, before the 6 emperors could answer, Wu Chang murmured to himself, I see. You are in trouble. Hee, do you need the power of the forbidden kind? If I can kill Wu Xian and help you with all the power of the forbidden kind, will you release me and let me get my descendants back? Great Celestial Emperor Ziwei Lingying laughed happily. It was so easy to talk to smart people. They did want to borrow Wu Chang's power, and they did want to control the forbidden kind. The Ziwei Lingying Great Celestial Emperor and the others knew very well that the potential and current strength of the forbidden clans were beyond the imagination of ordinary people. These so-called forbidden beings were not only the taboo of the humankind, but also the taboo of all living beings in Pan-Gu world. From the moment the forbidden kind abandoned their identities as human beings, they had violated the great Tao of Pan-Gu world, and became forbidden beings that could not be tolerated by the great Tao of nature. They were like cancer cells in a normal person's body. They were extremely destructive to all other normal living tissues. Perhaps these cancer cells were still a little weak at the moment, but what if they had the full support of the 6 emperors? They were like cancer cells. If they could devour people at the level of the Tao ancestor and the Buddhist ancestor, everything would be perfect. Of course, the forbidden clans were dangerous, extremely dangerous. Therefore, the 6 great celestial emperors would carefully control them. Before Wu Chang made a sufficient oath to restrain himself, and before Wu Chang accepted the restriction the 6 great celestial emperors had placed in his body and soul, the 6 great celestial emperors would never release him. After a round of scheming and bargaining, Wu Chang, who was imprisoned here and could not move, could only yield to the various demands of the 6 great celestial emperors. He cracked his own body, exposing his internal organs and divine soul, allowing the 6 great heavenly emperors to cast complicated restrictive runes on his body and divine soul with the power of the 5 supreme treasures of Grand Mist. When everything was done, Ziwei Lingying gave Wu Chang, who was locked quietly in the middle of the chain, a complicated look, and pulled out a golden seal from under his sleeve, which had a few cracks on it. He injected a stream of immortal energy into the seal, and beams of golden light shot out and hit the chains that bound Wu Chang. The golden chains produced a deafening rumble, then broke with a crash, sending countless broken metal pieces flying all over the sky. Wu Qi and the others had enough cultivation bases, so when the chains broke, they saw a dark shadow flash across them. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. The aura of this shadow was exactly the same as the aura of Wu Xian, whom he had met the other day. Clearly, Wu Xian had cast his own seals in the chains when Wu Chang was imprisoned here. The chains were broken, and the seals were destroyed. Clearly, Wu Xian had discovered what was going on here. Interesting, this is really interesting. The Forbidden Clan. Wu Qi couldn't help but be tempted. If there was a way to control the Forbidden Clan, it would be more useful than the army of heavenly ghosts in his hands. After all, the curse of the Forbidden Clan, which almost killed anyone who touched it, had left a deep impression on Wu Qi. What did their curse consume? It was nothing more than treasures of heaven and earth. They used the spiritual energy contained in these treasures to construct a curse array, thereby unleashing a terrifying power that could kill people instantly. There were countless primordial divine trees in the nether realm of Wu Qi and Yuanling. As long as he was willing to damage some of the primordial divine tree's vital energy, he could take 3 to 5 tree trunks and make them into curse puppets. With that, apart from those existences of the Tao integration stage, who could not kill them? But how could he wrest control of the Forbidden Clan from the hands of Wu Chang and Wu Xian? Wu Qi fell into deep thought. Ninetails bared his fangs and brandished his claws, wanting to pounce on 2 or 3 great celestial emperors to eat his fill. But Wu Qi smashed his fist on Ninetail's head, forcibly dispelling the greedy appetite of this fellow who was a little short of brain juice. A deep laugh came from the big mouth on Wu Chang's chest. Wu Chang, who was hundreds of feet tall, slowly floated down from midair and stood firmly on the top of the mountain. He stretched his body with all his might, and his joints made a crisp crackling sound. He laughed loudly and said, "After so many years, I can finally move my hands and feet." In the midst of his strange laughter, Wu Chang's body gradually shrank to the height of an ordinary person, which was about 10 feet tall. He shook his 3 heads and 6 arms, and suddenly, his figure flashed and appeared in front of the South Emperor. The South Emperor reacted very quickly. A dazzling red light burst out of his body and enveloped his whole body, and Wu Chang's fists had already smashed down like a storm. Every punch contained the vicious power of the curse, which made the South Emperor fly backward for hundreds of miles. The red light shield around him was almost shattered by Wu Chang's punch. The 6 great celestial emperors roared in unison. "Wu Chang, you're courting death!" Ziwei Lingying roared. The 6 great celestial emperors raised their hands and were about to activate the restrictive spell that had just been sealed in Wu Chang's body to kill him. Wu Chang hurriedly raised his 6 thick arms and laughed. Wait. I'm just venting my anger. If the South Emperor had not schemed against me, how could Wu Xian have wrenched away the power of the Forbidden Clan? Hee, what a pity that this South Emperor is not the South Emperor I know. I'm not having a good time beating him up. With a gloomy face, the South Emperor flew back to the top of the mountain. Looking at Wu Chang, he sneered and said, "Don't go too far, Wu Chang. Otherwise, we can choose someone else to work with, and you don't have to be the only one who can defeat Wu Xian." The Forbidden Clan that betrayed the human race was made up of dozens of tribes, big and small, and you two are not the only leaders of these tribes with the surname, Wu. Wu Chang waved his arm lazily and said coolly, "Indeed, apart from me and Wu Xian, there are also Wu Feng, Wu Sa, and Wu Wuyao. However, I am the only one who controls an army of the undead." Rolling his eyes, Wu Chang sneered and said, "I'll take you to a place. An army of the undead is something that no one in the world knows about except me. It is an army that can never be destroyed, just like me. They are all made up of the most elite warriors of the human race. You've made a big profit from this deal with you." Wu Qi's eyes flickered. An army of the undead? Was that true? Chapter 1070. Wu Qi, who was about to pounce on the 6 great celestial emperors and Wu Chang, pressed his hand down. He was itching to figure out what was going on with the army of undead, and what was the origin of the elixir of immortality. Wu Qi seemed to have heard of the names of Wu Xian and Wu Chang. When he was hanging around on Earth in the mortal world, Wu Qi had read some ancient books and seen some records about them. The elixir of immortality was a divine medicine that Wu Xian and the others had concocted, which could make living beings immortal. Wu Chang already had an immortal and indestructible body, which should have a lot to do with the immortal medicine. He also had an army of undead under his command, and all the warriors in the army were the elites of the Alliance of Human Tribes. The temptation was too great. Needless to say, the human warriors of the Alliance of Human Tribes were definitely much stronger than the Yu's Yuxiong army and Flying Bear army. At that time, the Alliance of Human Tribes had fought against the heaven, the earth, demons, ghosts, and all kinds of holy spirits. They were the real elites who had survived hundreds of battles, and those who were slightly weaker had long been eliminated from the battlefield. How could they be like Yu now? Apart from fighting a few battles with the Shizo dynasty and the Ling dynasty, they only knew how to bully those itinerant immortals and itinerant cultivators who had built their Taoist rite temples and sects on Panga continent. When had they ever experienced a real bloody battle? He had to get his hands on such an iron-blooded army. Gently patting Ninetails on the head to temporarily soothe his strong appetite, Wu Qi squinted at Wu Chang and the 6 great celestial emperors, who were standing on the top of the mountain and laughing loudly. Sure enough, when Wu Chang said that he had an undead army under his command, the 6 great celestial emperors immediately regarded Wu Chang as their own blood brother. The two sides were very close, and there was an indescribable intimacy between them. Before long, the group of 7 rushed out of the cloud cave on clouds, heading in a direction away from the celestial court. Wu Qi pondered for a while, then hurried after them on Ninetails with Yi Xia and Ao Buzan. Along the way, he informed Princess Zhanglu with a secret magic, asking her to bring reinforcements. After all, he had never seen the army of undead. If their fighting strength was beyond Wu Qi's imagination, he would need a few more helpers. Wu Qi was not so arrogant as to think that he could do whatever he wanted in the world. Pangu world was a vast world, and God knew what secrets it had. Not to mention the fact that Wu Qi was tracking the 6 great celestial emperors in the void. In the great hall of the capital city of Nu Wu, Dei slowly walked out of a golden light, his body glowing with a dazzling Buddhist light. He was holding a golden pestle with 9 dragons coiled around him, and wearing a faintly golden kasaya. The golden light slowly dissipated, revealing the sweat-drenched Buddha sentinel. His eyes, which had been full of vigor, were now filled with fatigue. Clearly, he had given the great Overlord endless benefits through the wisdom imbuement, which was a great burden on Buddha sentinel. Putting away the pestle, Dei put his palms together, bowed to guarding Will with a serious face, and said with a resonant voice, "I will never forget your kindness, Buddha. What Dei will do in the future will definitely be for the benefit of our Buddhist sect. We will definitely break those lackeys of the Buddhist sect and let them know who the true master of this world is." Nodding happily, Guarding Will smiled and said to Dei, Amitba, Amitba. I am glad that you are so determined." After a brief moment of silence, Guarding Will reached out his hand and beckoned toward the void. Immediately, 18 glowing treasures appeared around him. Each of them breathed in and out the surrounding natural energy like a living creature, letting out deep and long-breathing noises. A powerful pressure emanated from these treasures. Standing in the great hall, Monk Xiangchan and the others could not even stand straight when they saw these treasures. They could only put their palms together and bow respectfully to avoid the pressure. Dei stared at the 18 treasures with wide eyes. Each of them was a supreme treasure of primordial level, and they were spirit items with attributes that matched the cultivation techniques of Buddhism. After all, the primordial chaos world was extremely vast. All of the primordial chaos treasures were formed from the spiritual projections of the various treasures of the saints' world after they had been destroyed. As a result, there were many primordial chaos treasures. However, there were so many grand mist treasure artifacts, and among them, there might be some that leaned towards evil, cold, blazing hot, or violent. Even mighty figures like the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs could not use all supreme treasures of primordial. Perhaps each of them had collected a considerable number of supreme treasures of primordial, but not many of them matched the attributes of their cultivation techniques and could be used by them. Not only were the 18 supreme treasures of primordial, but their energy waves were also very compatible with the cultivation techniques of Buddhism. Furthermore, the 18 spirit treasures were all extremely lethal offensive treasures. If they were to fall into the hands of someone with a high enough cultivation base, even a Tao integration stage mighty figure would have their body and consciousness damaged when they unleashed the 18 primordial supreme treasures in unison. Amitba. Dei supremacy chanted the name of Buddha. With a shake of his kasaya, the 18 dazzling numinous treasures landed in his hands. He put his palms together at Buddha Shui and laughed. I won't stand on ceremony. I'm ashamed to accept these 18 treasures. With these treasures, if that guarding ox nose dares to glare at me, I'll flatten his Tao field and break all his bones. Buddha Shui nodded cheerfully. 18 grand mist treasures that were compatible with the Buddhism sect's cultivation technique was a huge loss to the 7 Buddhist ancestors. Even the Will guarding Buddha only had 4 grand mist treasures that were compatible with his cultivation technique, and he had given 2 of them to the Grand Unity Supremacy. Half of Buddha Shui's wealth had been invested in Supremacy Dei. This was exactly what he wanted to hear from Supremacy Dei. Monk Xiangchan and the rest waited until Reverend Dei kept the 18 treasures before they straightened their backs and chanted the name of Buddha in unison. They praised the Buddhist patriarchs for their boundless kindness, praised Dei for his great fortune, praised the prosperity of Buddhism, and said that the destiny of heaven and earth would be in the hands of Buddhism. These monks were all extraordinary in chanting scriptures. With a flick of their nimble tongues, all kinds of flattery turned into golden lotus flowers and fell down. For a moment, half of the territory of Nu Wu was filled with heavenly flowers, as if it was a grand gathering of Buddhism on Mount Vulture. The magnificent scene was too spectacular to be described with words. When monk Xiang Chan and the others finally stopped their flattery, Buddha Shi straightened his face and said to Dei with a solemn expression, "We've fallen into the trap set by the Wawang clan in this deification plan, so we can't do anything. The various great plans of the Buddhist sect will depend on your hard work." Dei bowed and accepted the order. "I understand," he said in a deep voice. "If there is an obstacle, I'll naturally break it." Laughing complacently, Dei said triumphantly, "The 7 Buddhist patriarchs have given me a total of more than 1,000 eons worth of Buddhist power. This level of cultivation base is already a peerless expert in the realm of Tao breaking. I dare not belittle myself. With my cultivation base and my foundation, as long as the Tao fusing saints do not strike, who in the world can withstand a full blow from me?" Shaking his thick neck, Dei said in a loud voice, "All the things in the world are illusions. The power of the Buddhist League will destroy all illusions. No matter how many magical techniques and schemes the Tao League has, I'll just take it as a blow from a Vajra pestle. What is the use of all kinds of schemes in the face of absolute power? Buddhas, just watch and see how I destroy Great Wu and kick Great Yu's emperor down from the throne." Buddha Shi grew more and more complacent. He kept nodding in approval, and the joy in his heart was indescribable. Just now, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs had joined forces to infuse Dei with cultivation base. All their cultivation experience and understanding of the heavenly Tao had been gathered in his body, and each of them had infused him with a cultivation base of 200 eons worth of Buddhist power. During this process of enlightenment, Dei's fleshly body and divine soul had no secrets from the 7 Buddhist patriarchs. Putting aside the infinite dharma that Lord Dei had obtained from the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, his body, which was tempered by the essence of the Vajra dragon-taming wood, was so strong that it made one's hair stand on end. At the very least, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs did some calculations. Ordinary supreme treasures of primordial chaos would not be able to harm a Dei supremacy's body, much less a 7 treasures Kasaya made from half a piece of Vajra dragon-subduing wood. A Dei supremacy's defense was so strong that it was beyond reason. It was completely beyond the level of a Tao-breaking expert. On the other hand, any random strike from him contained infinite power. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs had also calculated for a long time. A strike from Dei would be blasted into ashes, no matter what level of cultivation base one had and what treasures one used to protect oneself, unless one was protected by a supreme artifact of primal that specialized in defense. His defense was impregnable, and his attack was invincible. Putting aside intelligence, the Buddhist League never lacked resourceful people. What it lacked now was a general who could charge into the enemy lines with a murderous aura. The few Buddhist patriarchs even felt that if Emperor Wugo had not been wrongly chosen as the emperor of the Ling dynasty, but Dei, the murderous genius, had been placed on the throne, perhaps the Ling dynasty would have wiped out Dei long ago. After all, Emperor Wugo was the reincarnation of an ancient Buddha. He was adept at eating vegetarian food and praying to the Buddha, but if he really wanted to govern the country, only someone like Dei could do it. When he thought of all that had happened, and when he thought of Dei's formidable cultivation base, Buddha Shi could not help but smile. He nodded with a smile and said in a deep voice, "Let's put off dealing with the Tao League for now. Now, I'll give you another one." After hesitating for a moment, Buddha Shi heaved a long sigh and said, "Unfortunately, a traitor has appeared in the Buddhist League, causing 6 revered ones, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Vajras, heavenly kings, and countless other disciples to be imprisoned in the Vajra Muni. Dei, go find Wu Qi and exchange the Vajra Muni from him. Use whatever means you have, just bring the Vajra Muni back." After a moment of silence, Buddha Shi narrowed his eyes and said, "Remember, do not harm their lives. The Buddhist League cannot afford such a loss. As long as that bastard Wu Qi doesn't ask for too much, there's no harm in giving him some benefits." Dei looked at Buddha Shi curiously and asked, "Buddhist ancestor, how many things can this disciple promise him?" "TSK, 1 revered one is worth 3 grand mist treasure artifacts, right?" Buddha Shi nearly vomited blood when he heard Dei's greedy demand. 1 revered one was definitely more useful than 3 grand mist treasure artifacts. One was a living person, and the other was an inanimate object. There was no need to say which was more important. However, was he really going to use 3 grand mist treasure artifacts to exchange for one revered one? Buddha Shi's heart throbbed with pain. After a long moment of silence, Buddha Shi communicated with the other Buddhist ancestors through his divine sense. Then, he nodded slowly and said, "No matter what, bring the person back first. As for that bastard Wu Qi, as long as he doesn't go overboard, you can make the decision." Dei bowed respectfully with his palms clasped together. "I can make the decision." "Fine, then I'll really make the decision." Chapter 1071. In the boundless outer space, a chariot decorated with golden dragons and colorful clouds was flying at high speed. The 6 great celestial emperors and Wu Chang sat in the chariot, moving as fast as a beam of light. In the blink of an eye, they had covered a distance of 1,000,000,000,000 miles. Looking back, the enormous 33 heavens was just an inconspicuous dot in the vast starry sky. This chariot was the vehicle of great celestial emperor Ziwei Lingying, and it was supposed to be driven by a true dragon. But after the Mount Rebellion of Ao Buzan, the mounts of the immortals of the celestial court and the animals used to pull the chariot were all gone, and even the great celestial emperors could not find enough flood dragons to pull the chariot. You can't just get a few big snakes to pull the chariot, can you? So, who was sitting in the chariot, the great celestial emperors, or some demon king? Therefore, at the moment, the 6 great celestial emperors simply flew without a chariot. After all, the chariot was a rare chaos spirit treasure, and its flying speed was the fastest in the celestial court. Even if a Tao-breaking expert flew at full speed, he could not catch up with it. It was truly one of the best tools in the world for traveling and escaping. The chariot flew extremely fast, but when compared with Ninetails, a chaotic creature who had just hatched from his shell, it was nothing to boast about. The 4 pincers of the 9-tailed beast could even tear space apart. The 9 tails stretched straight behind him, and dark beams of light shot out from the sharp hooks on the 9 tails, pushing his enormous body forward at a high speed. He was more than twice as fast as the chariot. As a predator at the top of the food chain in the chaotic world, how could 9 tails prey on those chaotic creatures if he did not even have this speed? A large amount of saliva sprayed in the void, and 9-tailed happily chased after it. Just now, Wu Qi finally said that if he captured the 6 great celestial emperors alive, after Wu Qi squeezed out every last bit of profit from them and gave their divine souls to Yi Xia to devour, their bodies and cultivation bases would belong to 9 tails and Ao Buzan. As for how much food 9-tailed could snatch from Ao Buzan's mouth, it would depend on his own ability. Wu Qi would never participate in their affairs. Even though Wu Qi's words left a lot of holes, the delicious food was in sight, and the 9-tailed was full of energy to move forward. The group of people followed closely behind the 6 great celestial emperors and Wu Chang, and gradually arrived at a desolate starfield in the void of the outer domain. On the way, Princess Zhanglu came to reinforce Wu Qi with catfish, Lord Xiansheng, gold horn, silver horn, gold feather, and silver feather. Even the weakest among them was in the realm of Tao reasoning, and they were equipped with dozens of artifacts of virtue that had just been crafted. Whether it was in terms of cultivation base or magical artifacts, they were as strong as the 6 great celestial emperors. Furthermore, with the overall strength of Wu Qi, Princess Zhanglu, Yi Xia, Ao Buzan, and 9-tailed, Wu Chang and his companions would never be able to escape from their hands. 9-tailed was completely unaware that there were several more people competing with him for the delicious food. He sped forward with all his might, chased after the people in front of him, and rushed into the vast, desolate starfield. The so-called barren did not mean that there were no stars in this area. On the contrary, the density of the stars in this area was extremely high. Basically, the distance between the stars barely maintained a safe balance in terms of gravity. The slightest movement of a star could destroy the balance of the stars in this area and cause a violent collision between the stars. The group of people shuttled between these stars, which were very close to each other, and found that all the stars along the way were dead and barren. Wu Qi's divine sense swept through these stars and found that no matter what kind of stars they were, there was no heat inside them at all. It was as if some strange thing had devoured all the vitality of these stars. On some stars, huge mountains of bones could be seen piled up. It was clear that this was a place where life was flourishing, but for some unknown reason, it had become what it was today. The closer they went to the core of this starfield, the denser the surrounding stars became. In the end, the distance between the stars was only a few hundred feet. The huge gravitational force between the stars tore the stars apart, pulled out huge mountains, and connected the stars into one. The huge gravitational interaction on the stars caused these stars to change into all kinds of strange shapes. Wuqi always felt that this place was like a postmodern sculpture made of mud by some psychopath after getting drunk, revealing an indescribable evil and madness. The originally spacious void became a narrow corridor. After flying for a few more days along the corridor formed by the crisscrossing mountains between the stars, the front finally opened up, revealing a void filled with black gas. It was about 1,000,000 miles in circumference. Except for the black gas, there was nothing else in the void, not even a speck of dust. A scorching heat that made people's skin hurt rolled in the air. Wuqi's expression changed slightly, and with a shake of his hand, he summoned the Vajra Muni to protect the group. Ninetails twisted his long tail a little uneasily, and his divine sense clearly transmitted into Wuqi's sea of consciousness. There was delicious food ahead, very delicious food. Following closely behind the 6 great celestial emperors and Wuchang, the group of people passed through the thick layer of black gas that emitted scorching heat, and in the void ahead, a huge humanoid corpse was floating quietly. The man's whole body was dark, and there was no skin on the surface of his body. Instead, there was a thick layer of cuticle that looked like an insect's carapace, and the shiny black cuticle was densely covered with countless defensive runes. Obviously, this natural carapace had an extraordinary defensive power. The corpse was roughly humanoid, but his toes were extremely long, like the feet of an insect. His palms also showed the unique shape of a certain insect's brachiopod, and his head was like the head of a huge longhorn beetle. Apart from that, the rest of the body structure was not much different from that of a human. At a glance, Wuqi recognized that it was the corpse of a chaos fiend god, who was transforming from his original insect form to a human form. The original body of this chaos fiend god should be a huge longhorn beetle, 90% of which was about to transform into a human form, but before the last step was completed, he died completely. There was a huge crack on his head, which almost split his head in half. The crack went straight through his internal organs, and some translucent things that looked like black crystals were piled up near the wound, which should be condensed from the blood of this fiend god. The strange heat was spreading from this huge body, which was millions of miles long. Only a chaos fiend god could have such a huge body. Although this chaos fiend god had fallen and his divine soul had been destroyed, his body still retained a certain degree of activity. Blood was still flowing in most of his body, and his body tissues were still working normally. If he was given enough time, this half of his body should be able to give birth to another powerful creature. What a pity, what a pity. Wuqi let out a long sigh. He exchanged a look with Ao Buzan, and they both sighed with a hint of sympathy. Both of them were chaos fiend gods, and they were the kind of people who had survived a disaster. If not for the help of the Wahuang clan, both of them would have died long ago, and not even a corpse would be left behind. Although this fiend god was dead, more than half of his body was still alive, which could be considered as an existence in a different sense. What made Wuqi and Ao Buzan even more delighted was that if the thick black shell on his body could be peeled off and refined, it would be a top-grade armor no weaker than a Grand Mist Supreme artifact. If the flesh and blood on his body were used to feed Ao Buzan's children over the years, it would definitely strengthen their bones and greatly increase their strength. Good stuff. Wuqi put his palms together and bowed. We can't let it go. After we take away the useful things from his body, I'll call a few monks to perform a Buddhist ritual to help him ascend from the dead. Zishuan, make a note of this. When everything is settled, just spend some money to hire a few obedient monks to recite some scriptures. Ao Buzan let out a strange laugh. Just as he was about to say that Wuqi's behavior was a little hypocritical, Wu Chang and the others had already left the carriage and flew towards the fiend god's body. The fiend god's body was over 1,000,000 miles long, and the widest part was over 200,000 miles wide. It was much bigger than some of the stars in the void. If crops could be grown on his body, it could probably accommodate billions of ordinary people. Wu Qi's spirit power enveloped the fiend god's body. As he expected, there was a thick layer of atmosphere on the surface of the fiend god's body, and the temperature was just right, and the oxygen content was very high, enough for people to live comfortably on it. An inexhaustible life force could be sensed from the fiend god's body. In some specific depressions on the surface of the fiend god's body, some people had planted a large number of mushroom-shaped crops. These crops were nutritious, at least more nutritious than rice. Right where Wu Qi's spirit power scanned, he saw tens of sturdy men, who were over 10 feet tall and wearing ragged clothes, standing quietly on a protruding piece of shell. Their bodies were emitting a scorching heat, which had a strong corrosive power and was filled with a violent evil power. Their auras clashed and rubbed against each other in the air, causing a loud creaking noise from time to time. The cultivation technique practiced by these men was similar to the Yu's cultivation technique of the human race, but it was different at the same time. Their auras were as deep as the ocean, and vaguely revealed an aura that was several times stronger than that of the Yu's Hongmeng Panga heaven warriors. Their bodies were covered with a thick layer of dust, as if they had been standing there for thousands of years. Wu Qi's expression flickered. There were dozens of fearsome warriors who were as strong as primordial immortals here. If they were the so-called army of the undead, and they had the characteristics of immortality like Wu Chang, it would be a very terrifying force. About 1,000 miles away from these hundreds of burly men, there was a city built with boulders, measuring about 100 miles in circumference. Surprisingly, there were hundreds of thousands of ordinary people living in the city. The city obviously retained the characteristics of a slave society. Only a few people in the city enjoyed the offerings of the other 99% of the people. The lower-class people were ordered around by the upper-class people, but no one dared to show any dissatisfaction. Laughing strangely, Wu Chang transformed into a beam of black light and plunged toward the city. The huge human face on his chest could not wait to spit out a black seal, which was about the size of a fist and shaped like a strange beast's head. A cold look flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. With a sway of his body, he came next to Wu Chang in a flash. With a wave of his hand, the seal was already in his hand. Chapter 1072. As soon as the seal was in his hand, Wu Qi knew it was a good item. It was the size of a fist and weighed hundreds of thousands of kilograms. If not for Wu Qi, he wouldn't have been able to lift it. Even with Wu Qi's current physique, the meridians in his palms were frozen stiff. If it were any other immortal, their immortal body would have long been frozen into pieces. As soon as the seal was in his hand, a sharp, unpleasant wail of ghosts and howl of wolves rushed into his sea of consciousness, shaking Wu Qi's soul and stirring up a hurricane in his sea of consciousness. It almost sent Wu Qi's soul flying out of his sea of consciousness. Hastily, Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture and cast 13 sealing incantation gestures onto the seal. With that, he barely managed to restrain the violent backlash from the seal. It was a treasure, a natal treasure refined by someone's blood and soul. Therefore, when it was in Wu Qi's hand, it immediately attacked Wu Qi like a madman. The seal grew heavier and heavier, and the cold air grew stronger. It was so cold that Wu Qi's palms began to form black ice flakes. The wail of ghosts that could shake one's soul shook the 13 seals Wu Qi made. Wu Qi's body trembled violently, almost revealing his true form. Gritting his teeth, Wu Qi returned to Ninetails back in a flash. Princess Zhongli's eyes widened. The 5-colored divine light behind her transformed into 5 beautiful light curtains that poured down like peacocks. In the blink of an eye, they struck the seal tens of thousands of times. Countless ancient divine runes poured out like raindrops, forming 36 layers of restrictive light curtains on the surface of the seal. Wu Qi chanted the name of Buddha and silently exercised the supreme mystic art of the Buddhist League, the Dharamata Heart Sutra, which was cultivated by the heart-guarding Buddha and given to him by Supremacy Great E. His divine soul radiated a vast Buddhist light, and a viscous liquid the color of molten purple gold flowed out of it, condensing into a thumb-sized purple gold relic above his head. Using the mystic technique of the scroll of stealing to imitate the Dharamata Heart Sutra, Wu Qi had condensed the supreme natal relic of the Buddhist League in a flash. An enormous wave of divine will swept out like raging waves, turning into golden torrents visible to naked eyes and shooting out of his eyes. Mixed with the indestructible Yuan Ling true flame that could incinerate anything, they smashed into the fist-sized seal that looked like an evil ghost. Wrapped in the Yuan Ling true flame, the enormous divine will smashed into the seal's core, transforming into a 6-headed, 24-armed golden body of the Buddha, which slammed toward an evil ghost in the seal's core. The evil ghost looked exactly the same as Wu Chang, except that Wu Chang had 3 heads and 6 arms, with a huge face on his chest, while this evil ghost had 2 heads and 12 arms, with a ferocious ghost face on both his chest and back. The evil ghost flew up into the sky while spewing black smoke that smelled fishy, reaching out 12 sharp claws and digging toward the golden body of the Buddha transformed from Wu Qi's divine will. Just now, when Wu Chang saw the huge body of the celestial fiend, he was extremely excited. Without hesitation, he leaped out of the chariot and rushed toward the dozens of ragged warriors standing on top of the celestial fiend. Triumphantly, he pulled out the seal, the only extraordinary treasure that could control this army of the undead. It was called the Seal of 10,000 Ghosts, an extraordinary treasure personally crafted by a famous and powerful oracle during the era of the Alliance of Human Clans. It was said that he practiced the mystic arts of ghosts and deities with his human body, and in just over 10,000 years, he was almost able to reach the realm of Tao fusing by relying on the mystic arts of ghosts and deities. However, the great oracle was extremely jealous of this. When the gods and deities of the world joined forces, billions of evil ghosts would devour the human race from the ground. Therefore, the great oracle used his own body as a cage to devour the million most powerful evil ghosts, then used his own body as a material to detonate his natal ghost fire, refining the million evil ghosts and his own body into the seal of 10,000 ghosts. It was known as the Myriad Ghost Seal, which had a strong restraining effect on all spirit bodies in the world. No matter how strong one was, as long as one belonged to the ghost Tao, such as Gue Tunluo, the leader of the heavenly ghost realm, he would be easily killed by the seal, which could restrain all ghosts. Once touched by the seal of 10,000 ghosts, other immortals such as immortal souls, nascent spirits, divine souls, and Yuan Ling would be crushed to pieces. In addition to its formidable offensive power, the seal also had the power to imprison souls and command all the ghosts in them. The army of undead that Wu Chang had secretly raised came from large human clans. They were the most elite warriors of those clans, and many of them were even the descendants of clan leaders or clan leaders. They were all outstanding human warriors. Which one of them would easily listen to someone else's order? Therefore, the souls of all the soldiers were imprisoned in the seal of 10,000 ghosts, and only their fleshly bodies could walk outside. Anyone with the seal of 10,000 ghosts could command the army of undead, and once they left the seal, even Wu Chang could not order them to do anything. But, as soon as Wu Chang took out the seal, a dark shadow flashed in front of him, and his hand felt lighter. The bone-chilling seal, which exuded a threatening evil power, had disappeared without a trace. Less than 1,000 feet away from his feet were the dozens of ragged soldiers who stood motionless on the ground. They were now slowly raising their heads, staring at Wu Chang with cold, emotionless eyes that looked like puppets. Wu Chang was so frightened that his hair stood on end. "Celestial Emperor, did you steal my seal of 10,000 ghosts?" he growled hoarsely. "Bastards, are all your promises bullshit? My 10,000 ghost seal, 10,000 ghost seal. Damn it, if it wasn't you, then who stole it? There are no outsiders here. Who stole it?" Wu Chang howled furiously, pulled out 6 double-edged axes out of nowhere, and swung them at the great celestial emperor. Wu Chang used all of his strength in this strike. Lightning flashed on the broad axe, and black smoke and evil chi clung to the axe head. The blade of the axe was twisted and blurred, and a pungent smell of blood spread in the air. Each axe strike was imbued with 49,000 layers of curses, all kinds of evil poisons, and a mysterious power that could shake one's soul. Great Celestial Emperor Ziwei Lingying's eyes flickered as a bright light shot out from between his brows. In the next moment, A mirror that matched the positions of the 12 stars emerged and hovered before him, blocking Wu Chang's frenzied hacking. Just now, he saw Wu Chang take out a seal. Before he had time to investigate what the seal was, he only saw a flash of light beside Wu Chang, and the seal in Wu Chang's hand disappeared without a trace. When Wu Chang roared so loudly, the 6 great celestial emperors suddenly realized that this seal was the artifact that Wu Chang used to control those strange burly men below. Perhaps, as long as he had this seal, he could control those so-called immortal warriors. If that was the case, the army of undead was enough. Why did they need Wu Chang? The 6 great celestial emperors quickly exchanged a glance. Then, the South Emperor cast out a red bell and rose into the sky. 99 vermilion birds were hovering over the bell, and a divine fire was burning half the sky red. The terrible heat swept down and turned into 99 fiery dragon pillars that wrapped Wu Chang up. The South Emperor yelled, "Wu Chang, don't try to blame others. What exactly is that seal of yours? Why did it suddenly disappear?" Wu Chang snorted coldly. He did not answer the South Emperor's question, but just kept hacking with his eyes red and teeth clenched. The arcs of cold light tore through the void like thunderbolts, shattering one fiery dragon pillar after another. Countless flames landed on Wu Chang's body, causing his body to sizzle. His muscles and bones were all burnt to ashes. However, new flesh and blood kept growing out of the black ashes, and soon, Wu Chang's body was restored to its original state. The 6 celestial emperors were shocked. The red bell of the South Emperor was a famous treasure of the celestial court. It contained the innate vermilion bird divine fire, which could incinerate almost everything in the world. In the hands of a Tao-breaking expert, this bell could even turn time and space into nothingness. However, the innate vermilion bird divine fire seemed to have no effect on Wu Chang. Although it could burn part of his body could constantly regenerate. Was this guy really an immortal existence? He was not a Tao-fusing expert, so he should not have such a divine power. Wu Qi, who witnessed all this, could not help but chuckle softly. Wu Chang's power showed that his so-called army of undead was not fake. If the army of undead had the same vitality as Wu Chang, Wu Qi, who had obtained the myriad ghost seal, would have a terrifying army in his hands. At the core of the myriad ghost seal, Wu Qi, who had transformed into the golden Buddha, chanted a mantra, and waves of flame like Buddhist light swept out in all directions, burning the skin and flesh of the incoming evil spirits. Thick black smoke kept gushing out of the evil spirits' bodies, and their figures kept dimming and blurring. Wu Chang roared in pain and shouted angrily, "Who is breaking my mind's stigma in the myriad ghost seal? Which bastard is trying to break my mind's stigma? The myriad ghost seal is mine, mine. You can't take what's mine." Before his voice died away, Wu Qi chanted a mantra, and the evil spirits in the myriad ghost seal suddenly turned into thick smoke and dissipated. In terms of the strength of the spirit, Wu Qi's spirit, who had cultivated the Dharamata Heart Sutra, was thousands of times stronger than Wu Chang's. All these years, Wu Chang had been imprisoned in the celestial court mystic realm, and his vitality had been greatly damaged. His spirit had not yet recovered, and the evil spirits in the myriad ghost seal were just a clone of him. How could they withstand Wu Qi's attack? Not to mention Wu Chang, even the clone of the Buddha was killed by Wu Qi. After killing Wu Chang's mind stigma, Wu Qi's eyebrows split open, and a drop of purple blood mixed with a wisp of his spirit shot out and imprinted into the myriad ghost seal. A ghostly howl rang out, and a huge wave of mind power blasted into Wu Qi's mind. His spirit suddenly connected with a total of 8,000 souls that were crazily cursing and roaring. These souls seemed to be in hell, and they were crazily cursing the owner of the myriad ghost seal. At the same time, they were cursing everything in the world that they could think of. These souls had completely gone mad, and they no longer had any sanity. But through these crazy souls, Wu Qi's spirit could connect with 8,000 powerful beings. Through these souls, who were imprisoned in the myriad ghost seal and could never be reincarnated, Wu Qi saw the other end of the myriad ghost seal, which was connected to 8,000 fleshly bodies that shone brightly like the sun and emitted a strong aura. That's great. Wu Qi thought to himself. Suddenly, thousands of figures rose into the sky from around the gigantic body of the fiend celestial god. With just a slight movement, these figures tore the void apart with their physical strength and surrounded the 6 great celestial emperors and Wuchang. The South Emperor, who was in a stalemate with Wuchang while driving the divine clock, was stunned. A figure suddenly flashed behind him and punched him in the middle of the back. With a deafening boom, the South Emperor's immortal robe was torn to shreds, revealing a large patch of white skin on his back. A 3-inch deep fist print was deeply imprinted on the South Emperor's back. The punch almost pierced through his primordial unity golden body. A mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of internal organs sprayed thousands of feet away. Hastily, the South Emperor summoned the divine clock to protect himself. Wuchang stopped his attack. Seeing the undead warriors attacking the South Emperor, he knew that it was not the 6 great celestial emperors who had snatched the myriad ghost seal. Wuqi smiled, nodded, and said in a low voice, "Only 30%. Then, let's capture them alive." A deep black light flashed across the myriad ghost seal, and the 8,000 undead warriors moved at the same time. Chapter 1073. 8,000 men were ganging up on 7 people, and all of them were burly men between 12 feet and 15 feet tall. Their skin was so dark that it looked as if they were made of steel. Their clothes were ragged, with only dozens of cloth belts hanging on their bodies, exposing their strong muscles that looked as if they had been chopped out by knives and axes. Due to them standing motionlessly on the demon god's body for a long time, a large amount of dust had accumulated between their muscles, making them look like steel figurines that were buried in an ancient tomb. They were filled with an indescribable evil aura. The undead army soldier who had received the order to severely injure the South Emperor with one punch only used 30% of his strength. It was pure brute force, and he did not use any magic or divine ability. The power of the punch was comparable to the full-force attack of an ordinary primordial immortal. At the very least, the South Emperor's protective immortal robe, which was a primordial immortal weapon, was shattered by the punch and left a huge fist mark on his immortal body. If not for the protection of the immortal robe, the punch would have destroyed the South Emperor's immortal body. Wuqi also felt that he had gone too far when 8,000 undead army soldiers with such terrifying cultivation bases ganged up on one person. He shook his head and counted with his fingers for a while. Suddenly, he burst into laughter. He was so proud that he almost trembled. Not only did the Huang clan have a Dao-fusing expert who did not form a faction, but the 7 Buddhas and 9 Dao sects had established the Buddhism and Taoism sections. Did they have so many powerful soldiers? Together with those hermit cultivators, the Dao sects might have 8,000 Dao reasoning realm primordial immortals. But the Buddhism sects were far less powerful than the Dao sects. All the ancient Buddhas and Buddhas they had added up to about 3,000 to 4,000. With this power, Wuqi would have the strength to fight the Buddhism sects head-on. Wuchang had really done a good deed. The rest of the undead army soldiers hovered motionlessly in the void. Only about 100 of them threw their fists at Wuchang and the 6 great celestial emperors, who were protected by the 5 light curtains. The Big Dipper Emperor's sky-veiling flag of chaos had been snatched from Liu Bang by Wuqi, so the 6 great celestial emperors only had 5 supreme treasures of primordial chaos to protect them. With the help of the 5 supreme treasures, they could barely hold on. However, these undead warriors were indeed immortal. Their strength was boundless. In just a few breaths of time, the hundreds of warriors who besieged them had punched at least tens of thousands of times, and each of their punches had stirred up violent fluctuations on the light screen. The 5 great heavenly emperors, who were controlling their natal treasures to protect themselves, sucked in deep breaths. Every time they punched the light barrier, a portion of their magic power would be consumed. Although the Grand Mist treasure was powerful, it also consumed a lot of magic power. In just a few breaths, the 5 great celestial emperors had consumed more than 40% of their magic power. In just a few more breaths, they would run out of magic power. At that time, the power of the supreme treasures of primordial chaos would not be enough to protect them, and they might be captured alive by the undead army soldiers. Ziwei Lingying Great Celestial Emperor took a deep breath and growled, "Wuchang, can't you control these people now that you've lost the seal?" Looking at Ziwei Lingying, great celestial emperor with an ashen face, Wu Chang slowly nodded and said, "The seal is the myriad ghost seal, a precious treasure of the human race. It was crafted by the strongest high oracle during the era of the human clan alliance with his own flesh, blood, and soul, as well as millions of evil ghosts. These warriors are the strongest of the human race. How could I control them without the myriad ghost seal?" "You fool!" snapped Big Dipper Emperor in a cold voice. "How could you let them take the seal from you?" Cold sweat trickled down Wu Chang's forehead. His body trembled violently as he cursed under his breath, gnashing his teeth. He didn't expect such a thing to happen, to be able to take the seal of 10,000 ghosts from his hands without him knowing. Could it be that the Taoist ancestor or the Buddhist ancestor personally took action? What made him feel even more hopeless was how these 8,000 soldiers of the undead army had become so powerful. Years ago, when he led his people to betray the human race and was imprisoned by Wu Xian and several celestial emperors, he ordered his people to flee to this top-secret place with the 8,000 soldiers of the undead army. It was a lifeless and remote place, and no one had discovered the army of the undead army and his people hiding here for so many years. But why had these soldiers of the undead army become so powerful? Years ago, when his people fled with them, the 8,000 soldiers of the undead army had just taken the elixir of immortality. Among them, there were only 3 to 5 tribal leaders whose overall strength was comparable to a primordial immortal, while the rest were only as strong as a gold immortal. At that time, the undead army had just consumed the elixir of immortality and didn't have the characteristics of being indestructible. Moreover, they weren't as strong as the combined forces of the Heavenly Court and the Wuxian clan. That was why he asked his clansmen to bring them here to live in seclusion. But now, each of the 8,000 soldiers of the undead army had the strength to fight a Tao-reasoning primordial immortal, and there were nearly 100 of them whose cultivation base he could not figure out. Although he had been imprisoned in the celestial court for hundreds of generations of celestial emperors, without his control, these soldiers of the undead army could not cultivate on their own. So how could they have such powerful cultivation bases? Impossible! Wu Chang roared in a hoarse voice. Impossible! How could they have become so strong? Even if their bodies are immortal, their souls are in my hands, and they could not have cultivated on their own. They could not have become so strong. Wu Qi had the same question. The strength of the 8,000 soldiers of the undead army was really terrifying. Their souls were imprisoned by the myriad ghost seal, and their bodies outside were just puppets that obeyed orders. They did not know how to cultivate on their own, so how could they be so strong? But who cared? The stronger the undead army's cultivation base, the better. Looking at the 6 great celestial emperors who could barely protect themselves with the help of 5 supreme treasures of primordial chaos, Wu Qi felt refreshed. If these soldiers of the undead army were equipped with powerful magical treasures and armors, they would be the perfect war machine. Be it the Buddhist League or the Tao League, Wu Qi would not be afraid of anyone, unless it was an almighty expert of the Tao-fusing realm. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi revealed himself, holding Princess Zhanglu and Yi Xia's little hands. Ninetails rushed out of the encirclement impatiently, spitting saliva and letting out a long, shrill cry of joy. Instinctively, Ao Buzin and Catfish licked the corners of their mouths, and their eyes turned green. Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, and Silver Feather simply transformed into their true forms of dragon pythons of fire and ice, opening their mouths and staring greedily at the 6 great celestial emperors. Their hungry eyes were fixed on the great celestial emperors, who looked like sages and emperors. They looked delicious no matter how they looked at them. Wu Chang, who was covered in disgusting mucus and had 3 heads and 6 arms, had a hideous appearance. Unless there was nothing good to eat, no one would eat him. Especially since this guy had a strange undying and indestructible body. If he couldn't digest it and got a stomachache after eating him, what should he do? Sensing the crazy appetite of Ao Buzin and others, the faces of the 6 great celestial emperors turned green. But when they saw Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu, Ziwei Lingying Celestial Emperor suddenly breathed a deep sigh, shook his head, and said, "King of East Sea? Ha, it seems we've all underestimated you. Are you the one who took away Wu Chang's seal of myriad ghosts just now? As Wu Qi raised his hand, 36,000 Kunwu swords shot out in streams of light, forming a colossal fiend-slaying sword formation that completely sealed off this part of the void. The heaven refinement cauldron gradually flew up with a distant and sonorous rumble, and it suppressed the core of the sword formation, causing the sword formation to be completely flawless and unable to transmit any information out. Seeing Wu Qi's behavior, the faces of the 6 great celestial emperors, who were being beaten by hundreds of undead soldiers, fell instantly. How could they not recognize the most famous ferocious formation of the human race? As for Wu Chang, he was older than Xianyuan. When he betrayed the human race, Xianyuan had not yet ascended to the throne. Naturally, he did not recognize the killing formation with which Xianyuan had dominated Pangu continent and laid the foundation of the human race. In the void, the unique sword light of Kunwu swords flashed, and hundreds of surging sword energies came whistling over and injected into the bodies of the undead soldiers who were swinging their fists. These undying warriors, who were powerful to begin with, let out frenzied roars. As they swung their fists, streaks of silver sword light that were as thick as water buckets appeared. The light shields formed by the 5 primordial supreme treasures trembled violently and were nearly broken. Ziwei Lingying grew anxious. How dare you, King of East Sea, commit regicide, he snapped. Wu Qi laughed along with Princess Xianglu, Yi Xia, and the others around him. He shook his head and sighed. How did such a fool become a celestial emperor? Regicide? I didn't kill Emperor Diyu, so how is this regicide? Killing you will be a great contribution to the human race. Smiling and nodding at Ziwei Lingying, whose face was unsightly, Wu Qi turned to Wu Chang and said, As for you, Wu Chang, I've long heard of your name. He, you are the culprit who betrayed the human race, and the leader of the forbidden clans. After killing you, your head can be exchanged for a lot of good things from Diyu, right? The eyes of the 6 great celestial emperors flickered, and no one knew what they were thinking. Wu Chang, on the other hand, sneered with a gloomy face, Boy, I have an immortal body. Wu Qi shook his head. After pondering for a while, he shook his head and said, There is nothing in this world that is immortal. Even Pangu world can collapse and be destroyed, and even Dao fusing experts can be killed, not to mention you, Wu Chang. Without wasting time with the 6 great celestial emperors and Wu Chang, Wu Qi raised his hand. The Vajra Muni, which had sealed the 6 revered ones of the Buddhist League and countless ancient Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Arhats, shot out along with a fierce gust of wind. A dazzling beam of golden light smashed heavily on the 5 dimmed light shields. Amidst a deafening rumble, the South Emperor's crimson divine bell was knocked flying hundreds of miles away. The mirror shot out from between the great celestial emperor's brows with a wail as it was knocked far away. The East great celestial emperor's coiling dragon pillar glinting with a green light was knocked spinning away, and the West great celestial emperor's white sword, which glowed with a dazzling light and shook the void with an immense sword energy, was also thrown out by Vajra Muni. Only the middle extreme emperor's thick, earthy yellow tortoise shell barely protected everyone. The faint yellow light shield was extremely heavy, and it barely withstood the full force of the Vajra Muni. Wu Qi exclaimed, Good, this treasure is perfect for protection. Zi Xian, Yi Xia, which one of you wants this tortoise shell? Yi Xia and Princess Xianglu twitched their lips at the same time. Which beautiful girl would be willing to use a tortoise shell to protect herself? Only Ao Buzan raised his hand excitedly and laughed out loud. Lao Tzu doesn't care. Lao Tzu has killed quite a few female tortoises, so what's the big deal about using a tortoise shell to protect myself? Amidst Ao Buzan's wild laughter, Wu Qi gripped the Vajra Muni and struck it down again with all his might. Chi coughed blood as the golden beam shot out by the Vajra Muni trapped the 6 great celestial emperors. Chapter 1074. 6 great celestial emperors were captured in one fell swoop. Apart from Big Dipper Emperor, the natal treasures of the other 5 great celestial emperors gave a mournful cry and swooped down at the same time, smashing toward Wu Qi's head in a desperate manner. The spirituality of these supreme treasures of primordial chaos was not weaker than that of living beings, and even the spirituality of ordinary primordial immortals was far inferior to that of these spiritual creatures born in the chaos. Seeing that their master was captured alive, and that Wu Qi was the culprit, the 5 supreme treasures smashed down from above, and a violent aura was vaguely spreading out from their cores. Surprisingly, the 5 supreme treasures were going to self-detonate and fight to the death. Wu Qi was taken aback by the violent supreme treasures of primordial chaos. They were going to self-detonate when their masters were captured alive? The sky-veiling flag of chaos rose whistling into the air. A black mist enveloped the surroundings, and the 5 supreme treasures immediately lost track of Wu Qi's aura. A dazzling golden light split out from the Vajramuni's body. After the light rushed out for thousands of feet, it split into 5 beams and landed on the 5 supreme treasures. The 5 supreme treasures were no longer under the control of human beings and could only act on their own spiritual nature. A misty green light burst out of the heaven-refining cauldron, and the 5 supreme treasures fell into it. Yuan Ling's true flame and the heaven-refining cauldron's true flame merged into one, burning the 5 supreme treasures fiercely. The 5 great celestial emperors grunted in unison as purple-gold blood oozed out of their 7 orifices. The divine souls they had cast on their supreme treasures were forcibly broken by Wu Qi, and their divine souls were severely injured by the backlash. Their spirits immediately became listless, and their bodies shriveled like a deflated balloon. Wu Qi made a gesture to the 6 great celestial emperors. Laughing strangely, Ao Buzan immediately pounced on them and swiftly rummaged through their bodies. In just a few seconds, the 6 great celestial emperors' 12 storage rings, dozens of protective jade pendants, jade talismans, and their clothes, shoes, and socks were all taken away by Ao Buzan. If it had not been for Princess Zhang Lu and Yi Xia, who wanted to save some face for the 6 great celestial emperors, Ao Buzan would have taken away all their underpants. As the masters of the celestial court, the underpants worn by the 6 great celestial emperors were made of silk thread spat out by colorful spirit silkworms, and inlaid with various fire-repelling pearls, dust-repelling pearls, and other precious treasures. The cost of each underpants was comparable to that of a primordial immortal weapon. Wu Qi was not interested in the underpants worn by others, but Ao Buzan, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn did not have so many taboos. They were whispering to each other about which great celestial emperor had the smoother skin, which had the more muscular muscles, and which one tasted better. At the same time, they were arguing about who should get the 6 primordial immortal weapons. In front of the pale-faced great celestial emperor, Ao Buzan laughed and said, "Lao Tzu is not greedy either. Lao Tzu's toys are several times bigger than yours, so he has to take a few more underpants." Lao Tzu gets 3, and you 2 get 3. That's fair and reasonable. Gold Horn and Silver Horn flew into a rage. They angrily spat at Ao Buzan. What did he mean by his toys are several times bigger than ours? Did he have to wear an extra pair of underpants just because his toys were bigger? This was simply preposterous. This was simply going too far. The 3 of them immediately quarreled with each other, and the topic of their argument shifted from the underpants of the 6 great celestial emperors to the bodies of the 6 great celestial emperors. Ao Buzan suggested that the 6 great celestial emperors should divide the underpants equally, with each of them having 1 underpants. But, Gold Horn and Silver Horn firmly believed that Ziwei Lingying Great Celestial Emperor and the East Great Celestial Emperor were at least half a foot taller than the other 4 Great Celestial Emperors, and that their flesh and blood would be about 10 to 20 kilograms more. The flesh and blood of the Great Celestial Emperors were the aggregates of natural energy, and a single drop of their blood had the effect of allowing a mortal to ascend. The difference of 10 to 20 kilograms was a huge and unacceptable number. At the suggestion of Gold Feather and Silver Feather, Gold Horn and Silver Horn requested that the 6 great celestial emperors should be cut into dumpling stuffing, and then made into a big pot of dumplings. Then, they would share the pot of dumplings equally, so that the benefits of the 6 great celestial emperors could be distributed fairly. The 6 great celestial emperors turned deathly pale. Trembling, they looked at Wu Qi, their minds blank. Once upon a time, when they sat on the thrones of the Hall of Enlightenment and ruled the celestial court, did they ever think that they would have such a day? How could a group of cruel and tyrannical demons and monsters be thinking about how to cook them in the fairest way? They had never encountered such a thing even in their nightmares, for it was 1,000,000 times more terrifying than a nightmare. Wu Chang, too, stared blankly at Wu Qi. Wu Chang was not imprisoned by Wu Qi with an artifact, but as his cultivation base was only at the early stage of Tao reasoning realm, he was not stupid enough to break through the siege of 8,000 undead soldiers. Now that Wu Qi had mastered the myriad ghost seal, he could perfectly mobilize the 8,000 undead soldiers. Wu Chang reckoned that although he had an immortal body, he could not break through the siege of 8,000 undead soldiers whose cultivation base was stronger than his. Listening to the discussion between Ao Buzan and Goldhorn and Silverhorn, Wu Chang could not help but cry out in despair, "What are you trying to do?" The green eyes of Ao Buzan and the others immediately focused on Wu Chang. Catfish, who had been drooling and saying nothing just now, smacked her lips and said, "This guy is immortal. That's great. In the legends, there is a kind of meat that can be reborn after being cut, and can never be eaten up. Could it be this thing? TSK, just give him to me. Today I'll cut off one of his thighs, tomorrow I'll chop off one of his arms, and when I want to eat dumplings stuffed with human liver, I'll dig out a piece of liver and chop it up to make the filling. TSK, that's better than these 6 great celestial emperors' scriptures." The 6 great celestial emperors, whose faces were pale a moment ago, now had a strange flush on their faces. Catfish's description of Wu Chang's death was just too bizarre. Compared to them being chopped up into dumplings and made into dumplings, what was Wu Chang's death called? No, Wu Chang would not die at all. He would be kept as a meat storage by Catfish, and when she wanted to eat some pork trotters, she could just chop it off his body. If the 6 great celestial emperors were chopped into pieces, they would all die, but Wu Chang would be chopped into pieces, and would never be reincarnated. I am Wu Chang. Wu Chang said dryly, "I am a human." Wu Qi rudely interrupted him. He casually threw out a primal purple thunderbolt and smashed it onto Wu Chang's bull head. The shockingly powerful primal purple thunderbolt shattered his skull and sent it flying in all directions. Wu Chang gave a muffled snort and staggered a few steps back. "Shut up," said Wu Qi with a cold grin. "I don't care who you are from the human race, you're just a traitor of a clan. An immortal body? Hee, is there really an immortal body in the world? The so-called immortal body is nothing more than not killing enough." Laughing grimly, Wu Qi snorted coldly and said, "Wu Chang, I'll give you a chance. Put your soul into the myriad ghost seal and let me control it, and I'll let you live. Otherwise, not only Catfish, but all of them are very hungry for you. You will like a meat that can never be finished, yet has a strong cultivation base and is full of energy. Don't you think you will like it?" Catfish, Ao Buzan, Goldhorn, Silverhorn, and the others were drooling at the same time, and even Lord Xianxing was a little eager. Yi Xia even covered her little mouth and giggled, "Fiend monarch, Yi Xia is not interested in meat, but if this Wu Chang is immortal, doesn't that mean his divine soul can be reborn endlessly? Hee, if Yi Xia can devour a part of his divine soul every now and then, can his divine soul be reborn endlessly? I'm really curious." As Yi Xia laughed, a 5-colored light spread around Yi Xia, and the peculiar aura unique to the Fiend Patriarch from outer domains enveloped the surroundings. Chi-Chi, the 6 great celestial emperors, widened their eyes and stared at Yi Xia in horror. They knew what the aura emanating from Yi Xia meant. She was the heavenly fiend from outer domains that the Tao League and Buddhist League feared the most, and the incarnation of the Fiend Patriarch, the strongest of the shapeless heavenly fiends from outer domains. Wu Chang's forehead was covered with cold sweat. He swallowed dryly, threw his head back, and said with a wry smile, "Wu Chang, have a bad fate. Why do I have to do this?" Wu Qi impatiently cracked his knuckles, producing a series of cracking noises. Just now, Supremacy Day had sent him a message that there was a sky-high deal waiting for him to finalize. To be able to cut the flesh and blood of a Buddhist League member was much more profitable than robbing the 6 great celestial emperors. he did not believe that Wu Chang was truly immortal. Ever since he saw the infinite demonic power of the Thousand Heads Breaker, Wu Qi knew that time was not immortal. It was just that the attack power was not enough. If Wu Chang was really immortal, Wu Qi would use the Heaven Refining Cauldron to refine him. If that did not work, he would capture Wu Chang alive and send him to the Huahuang clan. Then, he would use the Thousand Spirit Cauldron to return his soul to the most basic soul particles in the world. By then, he would be dead. Wu Chang opened his mouth, but he could not make up his mind to be ordered around by Wu Qi. When he was released from the secret realm of the Celestial Court by the 6 great Celestial Emperors, he never dreamed that his fate would change so dramatically. He was going to summon an army of the undead to fight with Wu Xian and take back control of the Forbidden Clan. How did he end up like this? Seeing that Wu Chang was just hesitating and unwilling to speak, Wu Qi could not help but feel angry. With a casual point of his finger, the 6 great celestial emperors were dragged into the Heaven Refining Cauldron and imprisoned, howling. Then, he waved his hand and released a stream of pure Yuan Ling true flame toward Wu Chang. He was ready to give it a try and see if this fellow was really immortal. Wu Chang was taken aback, and he cried out hastily, "Fine, fine. I'll obey you today," but, after all, Wu Chang is. Wu Chang's face turned red. Obviously, he wanted to beg Wu Qi for some preferential treatment, but because of his status, he was too embarrassed to say it. After all, he was once an influential figure of the ancient human race, a famous high-ranking official in the alliance of human clans, and the ancestor of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors of the human race. Just as Wu Qi was about to scold Wu Chang, hundreds of thousands of mysterious figures suddenly flew up from the huge corpse of the fallen fiend god. Shrouded in thick black smoke, they slowly approached them. A sharp, hoarse voice rang out through the void. "Who are you? Where are you taking us, ancestral gods? He, since you dare to come here, you will all stay here." Accompanied by the hoarse voice, countless sharp, fierce, and evil spiritual attacks rushed toward Wu Qi and the others. In just a brief contact, Catfish, Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, Silver Feather, and Lord Xiansheng coughed up blood, and their divine souls were severely injured at the same time. Chapter 1075. Something was not right, something was very wrong. Invisible spiritual attacks kept coming at them, and all the people on Wu Qi's side whose cultivation bases were below the realm of Tao breaking were bleeding from their 7 orifices, and their divine souls were severely injured. Gold Feather and Silver Feather, the 2 sisters with the weakest cultivation bases, were struggling and twisting in the void in pain. They were forced to reveal their true forms. Their beautiful translucent gold and silver scales were cracked with countless eye-catching cracks, from which blood was gushing out like a fountain. Wu Qi's eyes shone with an eerie purple light as he turned to look at the hundreds of thousands of figures. Something was not right, something was really not right. They were all clad in robes made of some kind of very fine wood fiber, and their bodies were shrouded in black smoke. But, under Wu Qi's primordial magical eyes, he could see their faces clearly. The men all had rugged faces. They could not be considered handsome, but they gave off a rough and heavy feeling like a mountain or a boulder. The woman, on the other hand, was like a clear spring stream. She was beautiful beyond compare, but the corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows carried a trace of dark evil aura. She looked ferocious, but also strangely seductive. Any one of them could be called a peerless enchantress in the outside world, the kind of woman who could make men's blood boil, and who would fight to the death for them. Their looks might not be as good as Princess Zhang Lu and Yi Xia, but their strange, hellish seduction had added a lot to their beauty. They were a group of stunners who could make the opposite sex shed their blood essence, and even turn into human jerky. But, be it men or women, the strongest few among them were only at the level of the sun oracles of Deyu, roughly equal to the overall strength of a gold immortal. What they practiced was Deyu's Magisprius magic, which gathered the mental power of hundreds of thousands of people and turned it into invisible spiritual waves to attack the enemy. Unlike the ever-changing divine abilities and mystic arts of Deyu's oracles, these people's magic was crude and primitive. They attacked the enemy directly with their mental power, and did not have many variations. Although it was an attack without any technique, it had severely wounded the divine souls of Catfish, Lord Xiansheng, and the others, nearly killing them on the spot. Wu Qi anxiously and angrily took out the Vajramuni, and a ball of golden light enveloped everyone's body. At the same time, he began to recite the Heart Sutra, using the supreme divine ability of the Buddhist League to extract a great amount of divine soul energy from his natal relic and injected it into the spiritual ocean of Catfish Flood Dragon and the others, repairing their damaged divine souls. There were hundreds of thousands of Sun-class oracles, and only a little more than 10 of them were Sun-class oracles. 90% of the others were Star-class oracles, which was equivalent to the power of Deyu's apprentice oracles, which was equivalent to the power of ordinary cultivators below the Yuan divinity realm. Even if the divine souls of millions of them were added together, they would not be as strong as the divine soul of a Tao reasoning realm primordial immortal. So, how could their divine sense attack hurt Catfish Flood Dragon and the others? With a cold snort, a beam of bright purple light shot out from between Wu Qi's brows. The natal relic he had just formed with the mystic art of Dharamata Heart Sutra transformed into a blinding little sun and shot out. Rings of divine sense visible to naked eyes turned into bright purple ripples that spread out in all directions, greeting the invisible mental attack coming at them. The hoarse and unpleasant voice rang out once again, "Where did you come from? Why did you invade the land of the immortal divine kingdom? Hand over the 8,000 immortal ancestral gods of my clan at once, or I'll definitely kill all of you today." As the hoarse voice rang out, millions of tiny, fragmented mental attacks smashed onto Wu Qi's divine sense like needles. Wu Qi felt a severe pain in his divine soul, as the powerful and fierce mental attacks shattered the divine sense unleashed by his natal relic and smashed right onto it. Before the natal relic, which was formed hastily with a mystic art, could fully solidify, a few hair-thin cracks suddenly appeared on its purple-gold surface. Wu Qi gave a muffled snort as if his divine soul was struck by a thunderbolt, and at the same time, a large amount of sticky purple blood sprayed out from his 7 apertures. He stared in horror at the people of the immortal divine kingdom, who were shrouded in dark smoke. Clenching his teeth, he laughed strangely and said, "I see. No wonder you have such a powerful mental attack despite having such a weak cultivation base. You can actually hurt my divine soul." Following the mental attacks unleashed by these people, Wu Qi's divine sense found the source of their power. This mental attack, which was far beyond their actual cultivation base, came from the depths of the enormous celestial fiend's body. Inside the celestial fiend's body, countless naked human figures were wrapped in countless translucent membranes amidst the enormous blood vessels and meridians. These human figures were connected to the celestial fiend's body through umbilical cords, constantly extracting the inexhaustible life force from the celestial fiend's body to nourish themselves. These human figures had shriveled and small bodies, with only one head, which was extremely developed. Their heads occupied 2/3 of their bodies, and their huge heads were the size of water tanks. These huge heads were covered by a thin layer of transparent shell, and their enormous brains were squirming and wriggling at high speed. Each of these heads contained a mental power that was equivalent to the combined divine sense of 100 peak stage heaven immortals. The souls of these human figures had been annihilated by someone using a mystic art, and what was left in the celestial fiend's body were these strange, lifeless bodies. Each of these bodies had a monstrous brain, and each of them possessed an enormous divine sense that was equivalent to 100 peak stage heaven immortals. Using a mystic technique, these members of the deathless divine kingdom extracted the enormous mental energy from their bodies, compressed and released it with their own bodies, and turned it into a devastating mental attack that could attack the divine soul of a primordial immortal in the realm of Tao reasoning. Perhaps only a forbidden clan that had betrayed the human race could do such a cruel and inhumane thing. Wu Qi put away the damaged natal relic, unleashed the Vajramuni to protect everyone, and transmitted everything he had seen to Princess Zhanglu and the others through his divine sense. Everyone was taken aback, and even Ao Buzan, who was the most unruly of them all, could not help but show a hint of anger. There were more than 1 trillion bodies hiding in the membranes inside the enormous celestial fiend's body. How many sins had these people of the immortal divine nation committed? With a long roar, Ao Buzan thrust the soul-splitting spear into the void, unleashing an invisible force that swept across the surroundings. An invisible mental barrier emerged around the people of the immortal divine nation, which easily blocked the full-force attack unleashed by Audiobook with a chaotic spirit artifact. However, in Wu Qi's divine sense, at least tens of thousands of human figures in the membranes inside the celestial fiend's body had been blown to pieces. Surrounded by the undead army, Wu Chang suddenly cried out, "Are you the descendants of the Wu Chang clan?" "I am Wu Chang." Raising his 6 arms, Wu Chang roared, "I am Wu Chang, the leader of the Wu Chang clan." The hoarse, deep voice that was filled with endless evil sneered, "Wu Chang? A long, long time ago, he was the leader of my clan. But now, the immortal divine nation has nothing to do with the Wu Chang clan. You deserve to die for invading this place." All of a sudden, Wu Chang's 3 heads exploded, and a powerful mental attack struck him, causing his head to explode. Wu Chang's body wriggled, and his 3 heads regrew in the blink of an eye. But just as he was about to roar, another wave of mental attack landed on his head, and Wu Chang's head exploded again. Although his divine soul and physical body were immortal, in the face of the bizarre attacks from the people of the immortal divine nation, Wu Chang could only guarantee that he would not die, but could not guarantee that his body would be safe. Again and again, his head was reborn, and again, his head was smashed by the mental attack. Wu Chang and the people of the immortal divine nation fell into a strange cycle. When Wu Chang's head was smashed for the 100th time, Wu Qi waved his hand, and the Vajra Muni protected Wu Chang's body. At the same time, the heaven-refining cauldron emitted a beam of light, pulling Wu Chang's body into it, and imprisoned him together with the 6 great celestial emperors. The people of the immortal divine nation swarmed over from all directions, and at this moment, there were close to 3 million people surrounding Wu Qi and the others. Wu Qi's divine sense swept over the huge body of the fiend celestial. This was almost all the high-level people of the immortal divine nation. There were also close to 10 billion people on the fiend celestial's body, but they were all slaves of the immortal divine nation. The high-level people of the immortal divine nation were all gathered here. Nearly 3 million people had formed a formation that looked like some kind of strange cauldron, wrapping Wu Qi and the others tightly in it. Huge mental power flowed among them, turning into visible black translucent waves that lingered in the void. The huge mental power fluctuations shocked even Wu Qi. Perhaps the entire divine sense of a Tao integration stage mighty figure was no more than this, right? But how could the body of a mere fallen fiend celestial nourish such a huge mental power? There must be other secrets. The immortal divine nation alone could not have the power to nurture so many big-headed people in the egg membrane. What surprised Wu Qi the most was that, if the immortal divine nation had such strength, why had they been so unknown? They had been hiding in the void, unless they had been following Wu Chang's will and hiding here. But, judging from their attitude toward Wu Chang and the big-headed people they had nurtured, all signs indicated that the immortal divine nation was not the kind of existence that followed the rules. With a deep black curtain in front of him, the more Wu Qi thought about it, the more he felt that there was a big problem with the immortal divine nation. With a thought in his mind, the Kunwu swords hiding in the void around him split from 36,000 to 108,000, each corresponding to a law of heavenly Tao in the kaleidoscopic star core. They formed the fiend-slaying sword formation and sealed off the whole void. At the same time, he gave the 5 supreme treasures of primal he had looted from the 5 great celestial emperors to Princess Xianglu, Yi Xia, Ao Buzan, Catfish, and Lord Xiansheng, and asked them to quickly refine them, which would at least give them more power to protect themselves. Just as Wu Qi was doing all this, a hearty laugh came from near the broken head of the fiend celestial god. I was wondering who had come here by mistake. It turns out that the king of East Sea is here. Wu Qi, it seems fate has brought us together. A chariot pulled by 3 skeletal dragons rushed toward them, shrouded in black smoke and an evil aura. Near the chariot were 30,000 burly soldiers in heavy armor, who looked lifeless. There was no sign of life in these soldiers, and they were as inconspicuous as rocks. Even Wu Qi did not notice them when he scanned them with his divine sense just now. Now that they were in front of him, Wu Qi was shocked to find that the strength of their fleshly bodies was comparable to that of a peak-level gold immortal who had cultivated a body-tempering technique. Their armors and weapons were of excellent quality, comparable to superior-grade gold immortal artifacts. These 30,000 soldiers were so elite that they were not weaker than the Yu's Yuxiong army. And, the man sitting in the chariot was someone Wu Qi could never imagine, even in his wildest dreams. Chapter 1076. Lu Bang. The man sitting in the chariot, clad in a black dragon robe, a sky-reaching crown, and a pair of footwear, was emanating a murky, pale black light, giving off an extremely dangerous and bizarre feeling, was none other than Lu Bang. But, he was definitely not Lu Bang, at least not the Lu Bang that Wu Qi was familiar with. The Lu Bang that Wu Qi was familiar with was greedy and lustful, cunning and slippery, ruthless and cautious, giving off the impression that he was a little wolf cub struggling to survive in the midst of countless ferocious beasts. The Lu Bang in front of him, on the other hand, was a grown-up wolf, and not an ordinary wild wolf, but a demon wolf with a pair of wings on his back that could soar into the sky. A mysterious aura lingered around him, and his face was as calm as still water. His eyes occasionally flickered with a dangerous gleam. Lu Bang's cultivation base had reached the realm of Tao breaking, and he was probably at the first tier of the realm. Compared with the Lu Bang that Wu Qi was familiar with, this one was like a divine dragon flying high in the sky, while the one Wu Qi was familiar with was a pile of cow dung on the ground. The difference was too great. There was only one man standing behind Lu Bang. He was 12 feet tall, and his body was as hard as an iron ingot. His whole body was covered with dark muscles, and an inch-thick Taotai heart-concealing armor covered his whole body. Only a big, dark, hairy face could be seen. Fan Kuai, the strongest fighter and most loyal bodyguard of Lu Bang, stared at Wu Qi with wide eyes as he clenched the one-handed tiger-headed crescent halberd in his hand. Unlike the Fan Kuai that Wu Qi knew on Panga continent, who only had the cultivation base of a gold immortal at most, this one in front of him had the fleshly body and magic power of a Tao-breaking expert, a formidable figure who cultivated both fleshly body and magic power. Moreover, the aura emanating from his body was completely unlike that of a human. It clearly carried a strong aura of heavenly ghosts and demons. Wu Qi instinctively thought of the forbidden race's modification of the human body. The fact that Lu Bang could appear here with a member of the immortal divine nation, who was also a forbidden clan, meant that Fan Kuai's fleshly body must have been modified by the forbidden clan in various bizarre ways. It was only natural that he had the aura of heavenly ghosts and demons, and the speed at which heavenly ghosts and demons cultivated all kinds of evil divine abilities and magical arts was extremely fast, far surpassing that of orthodox Taoist and Buddhist cultivators. With Fan Kuai's aptitude, it was possible for him to have the cultivation base of Tao-breaking realm. On top of that, this fleshly body probably only retained Fan Kuai's image. Who knew what was going on with his original face and the soul in the fleshly body? Just by looking into Fan Kuai's eyes, Wu Qi felt a burning sensation on his cheeks. It was not an illusion, but a burning aura was really attacking Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi could not help but marvel at what kind of evil eye technique Fan Kuai had cultivated, as he could feel the same sensation even through the protective golden light of Vajramuni. Fan Kuai had provoked him in such a way, and Wu Qi was not a good-tempered man. He fully activated his primordial Dharma eyes, and the primordial purple energy transformed into Xianbing energy and shot out. A cold gleam flashed across the void as Wu Qi's eyes and Fan Kuai's eyes collided head-on. A loud sizzling noise rang out, and suddenly, a plume of white smoke rose from Fan Kuai's fiery red eyes, while countless tiny ice crystals grew in them and drifted down the corners of his eyes. Fan Kuai gave a muffled snort and staggered back a step. His body swayed for a moment, and he almost fell to the ground. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi left Fan Kuai, cupped his fist at Lu Bang, and said, "So, it's your Majesty, the King of Han. Aren't you receiving the abdication ceremony in Chang'an? Why do you have the time to come here? Don't tell me you don't care about the affairs of Great Wu at all." The chariot stopped a full 100 miles away from Wu Qi. Hundreds of thousands of people of the divine kingdom of immortality and 30,000 heavily armored soldiers surrounded Lu Bang. A pitch-black, oddly shaped long streamer made from countless bones was hanging over Lu Bang's head, from which a dense evil energy was bursting out. The faint dark evil energy merged with the divine sense power gathered by the surrounding immortal kingdom's people and transformed into a huge, translucent skull that shrouded Liu Bang. This skull, which was formed from evil energy and divine sense, was densely covered with millions of runes. These tadpole-shaped runes were swimming and intertwining, forming a huge, three-dimensional array formation. This skull looked strange, but its defensive power must be extremely strong. With just a glance at it, Wu Qi knew that it was also a supreme artifact of primal, and it was the most sinister kind of supreme artifact of primal. Looking at Wu Qi from 100 miles away, Liu Bang suddenly grinned and said, "Wu Qi, tell me frankly why I'm here." "Can't you guess why I'm here?" "I might as well be frank with you. After spending so many years on Pangu continent, the only person I can't see through into you is you." Sighing and shaking his head, Liu Bang smiled and said, "What I've seen today has confirmed my hunch. Why would an ordinary person come to such a secret place? And it's really beyond my expectation that you could capture 6 great celestial emperors alive." Looking thoughtfully at Liu Bang, Wu Qi nodded slowly. It seemed that the king of Han, Liu Bang, who had an extremely weak cultivation base on Pangu continent, was just one of Liu Bang's clones. Wu Qi wondered how many clones Liu Bang had created. With his overall strength as a first-tier Dao-breaking expert, it was easy for him to create thousands of clones, but it was not so easy for each of them to achieve something. Even with Wu Qi's current strength, he had only created 2 clones, Supremacy of Great Yi and Supremacy of Shouzhua. Even if Liu Bang had divided his soul with the mystic art of the Forbidden Clans, he could not have too many clones, could he? So the question was, how many clones did Liu Bang have? 3 or 5? How strong were each of Liu Bang's clones? And each of them had the cultivation base of a Dao-breaking expert like the one in front of him? And each of them had a supreme artifact of primal? How could such a thing happen? After all, he was only the least favored son of the South Emperor. How could he have so many resources? After pondering for a long time, Wu Qi pointed at the huge body of the fiend god and said with a smile, "Did you build this immortal divine kingdom, your majesty?" Liu Bang nodded with a smile. Putting his hands under his sleeves, he said coolly, "I'm acquainted with Wu Xian, and I learned some secret history from him. It took me a long time to find this place before the 3 eons successfully subdued these ancient clans, and built the immortal divine kingdom." With a faint smile, Liu Bang bowed slightly and asked, "What do you think, King of East Sea? You've experienced the power of my people." After pondering for a moment and calculating with his fingers, Wu Qi said bluntly, "If weaker Dao-fusing experts, such as the Huang clan, are attacked by them, their divine souls will be severely injured. Even the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Dao patriarchs will be severely injured if they succeed in their sneak attack." Liu Bang sighed in a relaxed manner, then nodded and said with a smile, "That's good. The 3 eons of tribulation have not been in vain." Narrowing his eyes, Liu Bang gazed at Wu Qi for a while, then said in a deep voice, "I call myself the immortal divine emperor in this immortal divine kingdom. If the king of East Sea is willing to submit to me, after I succeed in my great undertaking, I'll definitely reward you handsomely, king of East Sea." Staring blankly at Liu Bang, Wu Qi smiled and asked, "What's your great undertaking, your majesty?" Liu Bang laughed heartily, nodded, and said, "There's nothing shameful about it. I'm just trying to do the same thing as those Dao-fusing experts. To be honest, I've been coveting the supreme power of this Pangu world, and I want to truly transcend the mortal world and become a saint with the supreme fortune of the humankind." Giving a mysterious smile to Wu Qi, Liu Bang narrowed his eyes and said, "It's the saint of the divine realm, not the saint of the Dao-fusing experts of our Pangu world." Speaking of this, Liu Bang couldn't help but show a fanatical smile. Judging by his excited look, it was as if he had already seen an infinitely bright future, right in front of his eyes, ready for him to pick. Wu Qi shook his head. "The saint of the divine realm? Hee, don't you know that the divine realm was completely destroyed by the world breakers as well? Even the most powerful ancient saints of the saints' world were reduced to nothingness along with the saints' world. However, there should be some other key to this. Since Liu Bang knew about the existence of the ancient sages, he must have known about the end of the ancient sages. What on earth did he and the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs pursue to transcend the mortal world and become a saint? Perhaps it was necessary for him to pay a visit to the ancient sacred palace. Seeing Wu Qi remain silent, Liu Bang calmly sat in the chariot without saying a word. Fan Kuai rubbed his eyes, and the ice crystals in his eyes finally disappeared. Angrily, he gripped the pair of tiger-headed crescent halberds and stared at Wu Qi through clenched teeth, as if he would rush up and start a fight with Wu Qi at the slightest disagreement. Wu Qi paused for a long while Liu Bang could no longer hold back his temper. King of East Sea, you are a talent. I value talents the most. Submit to me, and with your cultivation and talent, you will be able to rule over a realm in the 3 realms of heaven, earth, and human. Looking at Liu Bang in surprise, Wu Qi shook his head, sighed, and said, only take over a world? I thought I could at least take over a world alone. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Fan Kuai burst out laughing, his voice full of sarcasm and ridicule. Liu Bang glared at him, shook his head, and said with a smile, I have many confidants around me, and I need to make arrangements for all of them. If I succeed, they will all be rewarded. As someone who has just submitted to me, the King of East Sea can take over a world and have the authority of one of the celestial emperors. What are you dissatisfied with? What was there to be dissatisfied with? There were many who were dissatisfied with it. Of Wu Qi's 2 incarnations, Lord Shoujuo was appointed by Daozu to be the Violet Pole Great Celestial Emperor, and Supremacy Dei was appointed by Buddha to be the Lord of Mount Gajrakota, ranking above countless Buddhist saints and only below the 7 Buddhist patriarchs. What Wu Qi had now was much better than what Liu Bang had offered, so he would be out of his mind if he chose to forge a bell instead of a bell. Shaking his head gently, Wu Qi was too lazy to talk nonsense with Liu Bang. He performed an incantation gesture with both hands, and the 108,000 Kunwu swords in the void immediately shone with dazzling sword lights. As the sword lights poured down, the formation formed by the 3 million people of the divine kingdom of immortal shook violently. Chapter 1077. As far as the eye could see, sword beams as thin as hairs were falling from the sky. Each of them was sharp, or as sticky as glue, and had a wisp of green-purple flame attached to them that could only be seen with the divine ability of the Dharma eyes. This was the power of the 108,000 laws of heavenly Tao in the fiend-slaying sword formation, which was strengthened by the kaleidoscopic star core. When the sword beams slashed on the barrier formed by the divine sense of the 3 million people of the divine kingdom of immortality, the translucent black spiritual ripples spread out in all directions. Each sword beam tore a crack hundreds of feet long on the thick barrier, and only faded away after penetrating tens of feet deep into the barrier. When the barrier was torn apart, the people of the divine kingdom of immortality let out shrill and long howls, and countless spiritual attacks shot toward Wu Qi and his companions like raindrops. Wu Qi snorted coldly. The reason he had wasted so much saliva on Liu Bang just now was to buy time to save Catfish and the others with a mystic art, whose divine souls had been injured. Now that most of their divine souls had recovered, it was no longer a problem for them to cast ordinary magic and divine abilities. So, Wu Qi immediately focused all his mind to control Vajramuni to unleash a bright divine light that enveloped the surroundings, and at the same time, he wielded the myriad ghost seal and struck the void. A black ripple visible to the naked eyes shot out of the seal, and amidst the shrill cries of thousands of ghosts, it smashed heavily on the spiritual barrier formed by the 3,000 people of the divine kingdom of immortality. Wherever the black ripple passed, the spiritual barrier shattered like a crystal struck by a heavy hammer. The 3,000 people of the divine kingdom of immortality stared in horror at the approaching black ripple. Before they could come up with any countermeasure, one ghost howl after another towered into the sky, and the heads of the 3,000 people exploded. Their souls shattered and scattered, and their bodies shriveled and withered, turning into dust that drifted in all directions. Ao Buzan and Lord Xianxing applauded and praised in unison. The myriad ghost seal had killed 3,000 people of the divine kingdom of immortality with just one strike like a hot knife through butter. It was no wonder that it was an extraordinary artifact crafted from the fleshly body of the strongest great oracle of the ancient human race. This 10,000 ghost seal was extremely lethal to all spirit bodies, and it was also extremely destructive to mental barriers formed by mental power. This was truly a pleasant surprise. Lu Bang was shocked and was about to shout when Wu Qi raised his hand and struck out with the 10,000 ghost seal again. 9 black, square-shaped ripples swept across the void. Tens of thousands of people of the deathless divine kingdom were shattered by the 1,000 ghost seal, and died on the spot. Lu Bang's expression finally changed. He shouted, "Wu Qi, you're courting death." Muffled sounds of collisions rang out incessantly as the mental attacks unleashed by the people of the deathless divine kingdom slammed into the divine light transformed from Vajramuni. Like a huge golden bell, the divine light that protected Wu Qi and others would sink into it from time to time, and the tremendous impact made Wu Qi lose his balance. The Vajramuni was trembling violently, and Wu Qi felt that his magic power was being consumed rapidly. Wu Qi's cultivation base was very high, but his magic power was relatively weak. He was not as strong as those Tao-breaking experts of the Buddhist League and Tao League, who had cultivated for countless eons, and had accumulated enough magic power. Now that his magic power had been consumed excessively, beads of cold sweat immediately broke out on Wu Qi's forehead. There was no shortcut in fighting head-on. Every bit of magic power he consumed was a bit. Even if Wu Qi could devour all the energy in the void and turn it into his own, he had to have enough energy in the outside world for him to devour. Now, they were surrounded by the vast void. The people of the deathless divine kingdom had formed a formation to trap Wu Qi, and Wu Qi's fiend-slaying sword formation had trapped the people of the deathless divine kingdom. All the natural energy in the void had been drained by the formation, so how could Wu Qi get any replenishment? In desperation, when 30% of his magic power was consumed, Wu Qi suddenly snapped at the Vajramuni, "If you don't want your cultivation base destroyed, if you still want to see the light of day again, if you still want to go back to the Buddhist League and be worshipped by millions of believers, you'd better do as I say." Inside the Vajramuni, countless streams of enraged divine sense collided for a while, and then a calm divine sense came through the Vajramuni and made contact with Wu Qi. Overjoyed, Wu Qi clenched the 10,000 ghost seal in his right hand and grabbed the Vajramuni with his left hand. Then, he clasped the surface of the Vajramuni with his fingers and made 5 small holes in the inverse Vajra rotary formation inside the Vajramuni, drawing out the mighty power of the formation according to the positions of the 5 elements. Then, the sound of chanting rang out, and a 10,000 miles tall Vajra statue of the Buddhist League appeared over Wu Qi and his companions. The Vajra rotary formation, the strongest defensive formation in the world, composed of 6 revered ones, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, and countless bodhisattvas, arhats, vajras, and heavenly kings, appeared around Wu Qi and his companions. The spiritual blasts unleashed by the 3 million people of the deathless divine kingdom smashed into the formation and shattered into countless sparks visible to the naked eye, scattering in all directions. The Vajra rotary formation was as sturdy as a mountain and as powerful as the Vajramuni. No matter how many attacks were thrown at it, it remained unshaken. Lu Bang was dumbfounded at the sight of the formation. The Vajra rotary formation was the strongest defensive formation in the Buddhist League. With the protection of this formation, even if the 3 million people of the deathless divine kingdom could borrow the spiritual power of the countless big-headed people in the body of the fallen fiend celestial god and possess a spiritual power that was close to that of a Tao integration stage mighty figure, what could they do to Wu Qi? After all, this formation was so sturdy that even the Buddhas himself couldn't break it. With his brows tightly furrowed, Lu Bang gritted his teeth and said, "Wu Qi, do you really want to go against me?" Wu Qi said coldly, "Lu Bang, cut the crap. You've worked so hard to subdue these ancient people and build this so-called deathless divine kingdom. What you're plotting is no small matter. Today, I've discovered your secret. Are you going to let me go? If you can't recruit me, you're going to kill me. Am I wrong?" Lu Bang snorted coldly and nodded slowly. Wu Qi was right. They had broken into this place and discovered Lu Bang's secret. Therefore, he had to keep Wu Qi and the others here no matter what. If he couldn't recruit them for his own use, he had to kill them. The Deathless Divine Kingdom and Lu Bang's identity as the Deathless Divine Emperor were very shameful. he didn't want his secret to be known by the world just like this. After a moment of silence, Lu Bang slowly raised his right hand and waved it forward. A series of sharp and unpleasant dragon roars came from near the head of the fallen fiend celestial god. Large swathes of black clouds and evil aura gushed out from the huge wound on the head of the fiend celestial god. At least 100,000 skeletons, each 1,000 feet long and covered in green ghostly flames, dragged heavily armored knights toward them. Like the tens of thousands of guards around Lu Bang, these 100,000 knights did not have the slightest aura or vitality. They did not even have the evil aura of zombies. 100,000 skeletons Chi-Chi opened their mouths and shot out 100,000 green ghostly flames, each as thick as a water tank, which tore through the void and bombarded the golden light transformed from the Vajra rotary formation. The golden light remained motionless, while the 100,000 ghostly flames exploded into green flames that drifted in the air. Then, the 100,000 knights swung their swords at the same time. The void in front of them collapsed with a loud rumble, turning into a crack visible to the naked eye and slamming into the Vajra rotary formation. Finally, Wu Qi's body swayed. After all, he had only created a crude Vajra rotary formation with the sacred power of the Buddhist League in the Vajra Buddhist Temple. It looked extraordinary, but in fact, its defensive power was only 30% of the original Vajra rotary formation. The joint attack of the 100,000 knights easily shattered the void, and its offensive power was at least equal to that of 30 peak-level Dao breaking great overarching golden immortals. The blow instantly shattered the 5 holes Wu Qi had made on the Vajra Buddhist temple, and the Buddhist power reversed and backfired, almost knocking Wu Qi's fingers off the temple. "You're really something, Lu Bang." Wu Qi burst into laughter. His mind raced as he quickly performed an incantation gesture with both hands and pointed a finger at the sky. The fiend's slaying sword formation was operating at full power, and 6 huge stars with silvery gleams appeared in the void in the direction of the southern Dipper star. The 6 huge stars produced a dull rumble, and then 6 huge sword beams, each 100 miles thick, came whistling down from the sky and slammed heavily onto the 100,000 bone dragon knights. Lu Bang's face fell with horror. "Wu Qi, you ungrateful bastard! How dare you," he cursed. When Lu Bang mingled in the mortal world, he often mingled in the streets. The filthy language he heard was endless, and it was truly a dazzling array of eye-catching words. When Lu Bang cursed Wu Qi did not take it seriously, but Princess Xianglu and Yi Xia flew into a rage. It was just that Princess Xianglu was born in the imperial family, so she was not good at swearing, and Yi Xia had only learned to speak human language a few days ago. How could she be Lu Bang's opponent? Immediately, the 5-colored divine ray behind Princess Xianglu rolled wildly, then merged into a mass of chaotic energy and condensed into dozens of fist-sized thunderbolts that shot forward. Yi Xia, on the other hand, narrowed her eyes and suddenly let out a shrill shriek that almost ripped the eardrums of Wu Qi, Ao Buzan, and the others beside her. The 6 sword beams unleashed by Wu Qi struck heavily on the bodies of the 100,000 bone dragon cavaliers, sending countless pale dragon bones and dark armor fragments flying in all directions. At least 30,000 bone dragon cavaliers were smashed to pieces. Although these bone dragon cavaliers looked rather strange and the attacks they unleashed were incredibly powerful, their own defenses seemed to be extremely fragile. With just one strike, Wu Qi had destroyed 30% of them. The chaotic thunderbolts condensed by Princess Xianglu came whistling over. Dozens of seemingly inconspicuous thunderbolts exploded, each of them wiping out the void within a radius of several miles. Over 20,000 bone dragon cavaliers were destroyed by the thunderbolts. Unlike Wu Qi's sword beams, which still left some dragon bone fragments and armor fragments, Princess Zhongli's thunderbolts turned everything into nothingness, leaving nothing behind. However, Yi Xia's long cry was not aimed at those bone dragon cavaliers. Instead, it pierced straight into the ears of those people from the immortal divine kingdom through the thick spiritual energy shield. At least half of the 3 million people from the deathless divine kingdom were shaken. They howled out miserably as a faint 5-colored flame burst out from the center of their eyebrows, palms, and feet. The strange flame spread out quickly, burning them like human-shaped torches. From time to time, the sound of oil exploding could be heard from time to time. In just the time of 2 to 3 breaths, nearly 1,800,000 people from the immortal divine kingdom were burned into ashes. Yi Xia gave a weird smile, but a stream of blood sprayed out from her mouth. How could the ancestor of the invisible sky devils from outer space be underestimated? By consuming half of her spiritual force, Yi Xia launched a thunderous strike with the method of self-destruction. Indeed, she had severely wounded those people from the immortal divine kingdom under Lu Bang's command. Speaking of playing with souls and spirits, the invisible sky devils from outer space were the best in this field, and no one could ever be better than them. Lu Bang was so angry that he leaped up from the chariot, waving his arms and legs as if he was dancing. These were all his most precious treasures. These people from the immortal divine kingdom, these bone dragon cavaliers, were all gone. How could he replace them? Lu Bang's eyes turned red. Forgetting about the consequences, he sprayed a mouthful of blood onto the oddly shaped, dark, bone streamer floating above his head, then fiercely waved it towards Wu Qi and the others. A cold gust of wind rose from the ground, and the golden light released from Vajramuni dimmed and shattered instantly. Chapter 1078. Wu Qi was struck dumb. The Vajramuni, an important treasure of the Buddhist League and the core of the Vajra revolving formation, could not withstand a single strike from Lu Bang's strange flag. Not only did the Vajramuni's light dimmed, but Wu Qi also felt an evil cold air coming from his palm, rushing straight into his internal organs through the Vajramuni. He felt a sharp pain in his palm, which was the frostbite on his skin. Wu Qi's palms were pale and blue from the cold, and wisps of dark green mist that could be seen with naked eyes were rising from them. His bones and flesh had turned translucent, as if they had been frozen into ice cubes. Fortunately, the evil cold air had not exceeded the limit of Wu Qi's divine power. He exercised the scroll of stealing quietly, melting the cold air bit by bit and turning it into primal purple airflow that circulated through his body. The evil energy was extremely pure, and each wisp of it contained a very strong power. He had no idea what the origin of the flag was, and why it could unleash such an incredible attack. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi exercised the power of the Vajramuni. A strong Buddhist light rushed out from the flag, while the 6 revered ones, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, and even those bodhisattvas and arhats were chanting mantras at the same time, pushing the power of the Vajramuni to the maximum. The warm and masculine Buddhist light shone in all directions, and the cold air that rushed into Wu Qi's body gradually dissipated, turning into Wu Qi's own magic power. Seeing that his attack was ineffective, Lu Bang coughed out 7 mouthfuls of blood and waved the flag 7 times. On the flag, which was about 1 mile wide and 13 miles long, countless fist-sized, grotesque skulls began to sway at the same time, letting out ferocious howls as their eyes fixed on Wu Qi at the same time. Even through the thick Buddhist light, Wu Qi still felt as if his 7 apertures were locked by countless invisible evil forces. Humph. Yi Xia snorted coldly. She pressed one hand on Wu Qi's back, and a stream of 5-colored blood flowed out from her fingertip, quickly drawing countless runes and talismans on Wu Qi's back. The strange runes and talismans glowed with an evil aura as they flew into Wu Qi's body. The invisible forces that had locked Wu Qi's 7 apertures suddenly disappeared, and Lu Bang unleashed a thunder fire from his palm and smashed it onto the flag. The flag shook violently, and the countless skulls on it howled in pain, while a great evil force enveloped the surroundings. Hundreds of thousands of citizens of the immortal divine kingdom let out miserable howls as green fireflies flew out of their 7 apertures into the long banners and were devoured by those skulls. Vomiting blood out of his mouth, Lu Bang cursed furiously. He stared at Wu Qi in both shock and fear, wondering what kind of evil magic Wu Qi had used to break his flag. It was indeed an evil magic. Yi Xia was a fiend ancestor, who held the highest position among all the invisible sky devils in outer domains. With a secret magic, the evil force that Lu Bang used to seal Wu Qi's 7 apertures and suppress his divine soul was transferred to the bodies of those people of the divine kingdom of immortal by Yi Xia. How could the cultivation of those people be compared with Wu Qi? If the entire flag struck Wuqi, perhaps Wuqi's divine soul would be severely wounded, but the souls of those hundreds of thousands of people of the divine kingdom of immortal would be torn out of their bodies, and their lives would be devoured by the flag. Not only their souls flew out from their 7 apertures, but before long, the corpses of the people of the divine kingdom of immortal flew up into the air as well, then were torn into pieces by the countless skulls on the flag and swallowed. Blood splashed everywhere on the flag, and minced meat poured down like a rainstorm. It was an extremely cruel scene. Princess Xianglu snorted coldly. The 5-colored divine light transformed into 5 beams of light and swept out, fiercely bumping on the spiritual energy shield that covered the bodies of those people of the divine kingdom of immortal. She flicked her fingers, and within a blink of an eye, thousands of spell symbols darted out from her fingertips. Like the most brilliant clay sculptor, she squeezed the extremely strong spiritual energy that was rolled up by the 5-colored divine light into tens of water tank-sized, translucent thunderballs. Lu Bang's expression flickered. With a wave of the streamer over his head, a stream of evil energy poured down like a waterfall, sucking the dozens of thunderballs condensed from psychic power into the evil energy and sending them thousands of miles away in the blink of an eye. Along with a few barely audible popping noises, those thunderballs exploded. Lu Bang's body slightly quivered, and 2 streams of blood suddenly flowed down from his nose. After all, these people of the divine kingdom of immortal had manipulated the spiritual energy of those big-headed people for their own use, and their control over all kinds of spiritual energy and souls had reached a perfect level. After all, these people of the divine kingdom of immortal had manipulated the spiritual energy of those big-headed people for their own use, and their control over all kinds of spiritual energy and souls had reached a perfect level. Meanwhile, Princess Xianglu had inherited the spiritual energy of ghosts from the ancient Tao of divinity, and could be considered as a master in this field. Once they struck with their full strength, how could Lu Bang not suffer? Even though Lu Bang's oddly shaped flag was a supreme artifact of primal level, and the most powerful and effective one, it could not escape from the category of spiritual energy, soul, and spiritual energy. Therefore, it naturally fell into the control of Yi Xia and Princess Xianglu. His attacks had failed several times, and instead, he had caused his men to suffer heavy losses. So angry that he wished he could fight Wuqi to the death, he threw his head back and let out a few long roars into the sky. The torrent of air that spewed out of his mouth sent 2 streams of blood shooting hundreds of feet into the air. Standing next to him, Fan Kuai's face turned cold and gloomy. The subject must die if his master is insulted. Do you dare to fight me to the death, Wuqi, you punk? Holding 2 tiger-headed crescent halberds, Fan Kuai transformed into a black whirlwind and sped toward Wuqi. Turning a blind eye to the dazzling golden light unleashed by the Vajramuni, he swung his halberds and hacked them down at Wuqi. Ao Buzan grinned hideously. With a sway of his body grew to 30 feet tall, and a series of cracking noises rang out from under his skin as countless black dragon scales the size of a palm emerged layer by layer. Throwing his head back and roaring, Ao Buzan, who had transformed into a dragon man, rushed out of the Vajramuni's protective circle and went head-on to meet Fan Kuai. With a sway of his body, Ao Buzan's left and right shoulders were hit by Fan Kuai's 2 tiger-headed crescent halberds. The dragon scales on his shoulders shattered, and the halberds went half a foot deep into his flesh. If it were an ordinary person, this injury would be enough to make him lose the ability to fight, but Ao Buzan was the Zhu Long of the Chaos World, one of the most ferocious fiends in the Chaos World. The severe pain in his shoulders made Ao Buzan's lower body suddenly stand up straight like a spear. Eyes gleaming with a violent killing intent, he leaped up and kicked Fan Kuai in the lower abdomen while laughing strangely. A cracking sound rang out as 5 sharp dragon claws, each about 3 feet long, shot out from Ao Buzan's toes and pierced Fan Kuai's body like 5 swords. Fan Kuai roared in pain. He tried to pull the halberds out of his body, but the muscles around the wound on Ao Buzan's shoulders were growing crazily, wrapping the halberds in Ao Buzan's purple-golden muscles. No matter how hard he tried, he could not pull them out. Fan Kuai roared furiously. He threw down the 2 tiger-headed crescent halberds and was about to reach out his hand to wrap around Ao Buzan's head. He had great confidence in his infinite divine power, and he was confident that he could break Ao Buzan's neck and kill him. But Ao Buzan was not fighting alone. The group of villains around Wuqi definitely did not know what a fair duel was. Before Fan Kuai could stretch out his arms, which were as strong as iron poles, a gust of wind came blowing over his head. In the next moment, a large iron hammer, gleaming with the dark yellow luster unique to an item of virtue and emanating a fierce pressure, smashed whistling through the air and smashed the top of his head. Rather than calling it a hammer, it would be more accurate to call it a square-shaped mountain. It was a lump of metal that was nearly 1,000 cubic feet in size. The face of the hammer measured 80 feet in both length and width, and its head was 180 feet in height. Its body was cast with a pitch-black star alloy from outer domains, and its handle, which was nearly 1,000 feet long and as thick as the beam of a small house, was held tightly in the little Lolita's hand. The petite catfish flood dragon was spitting white saliva from her mouth, her eyes gleaming with the flames of greed as she waved the hammer like a windmill and smashed it 380 times on the top of Fan Kuai's head in just a flash. It was the largest and heaviest of all the items of virtue Wuqi had ever crafted. It was made of the heavy metal from the core of a star found in the chaotic world, which made it extremely heavy and strong. Coupled with Wuqi's amazing crafting skills, this big guy, which Catfish Flood Dragon named Black Dragon Hammer, was truly a ferocious killing weapon. Amidst Lu Bang's furious roar, the Black Dragon Hammer made Fan Kuai bleed from his 7 orifices, and the top of his head was smashed like tofu. Fan Kuai, who had reached out his hand to strangle Ao Buzan, howled in pain as he struggled to block Catfish's crazy attack. But, he felt a sharp pain in both his hands and feet at the same time. Gold Horn, Silver Horn, and Gold Feather, who had transformed into their true forms of dragon pythons of fire and ice, shot out 4 streams of golden and silver light at the same time, piercing through Fan Kuai's hands and feet and destroying the most important meridians and joints in his arms and thighs. Lu Bang cursed like a street thug, going straight for the private parts of Wuqi's 18 generations of ancestors. Enraged and ashamed, Lu Bang pulled out a small black dagger and stabbed it into his own heart. A purple and sticky beam of blood-red light darted out of Lu Bang's heart. 18. Spirit True Blood, which was the most important thing for a cultivator and could only be condensed with a great deal of hard work, shot out from his heart. 18 drops of true blood shot out and fell into the forehead of the huge fallen fiend god in a flash. Fan Kuai's miserable howl kept ringing out. Lord Xiansheng was not a fair and just man, but a demon king who ruled myriad immortals' planet's Longyuan River in his bones. While Fan Kuai was badly beaten by the crowd, Lord Xiansheng let out a strange laugh. The illusion-breaking halberd turned into countless beams of cold light and shot out from all over Fan Kuai's body, tearing through his well-tempered body with ease. In the face of the halberd, which could even pierce through the void, Fan Kuai's body was defenseless like tofu. Finally, he let out a despairing howl and cried out, "Your Majesty, save me! Save me!" With a gloomy face, Lu Bang pointed a finger at the long banner over his head. Immediately, more than 30% of the little skulls on the huge banner exploded at the same time, sending out countless wisps of black smoke and evil energy to condense into a huge palm that grabbed toward Fan Kuai. The crowd who were besieging Fan Kuai felt a chill run through their bodies, as if their blood was about to freeze. They hastily retreated to the protection of the strong golden light emanating from the Vajramuni in Wuqi's palm. Fan Kuai was grabbed back by Lu Bang, and Lu Bang roared furiously, "All of you will die here today. I don't care about the army of the undead. Let the army of the undead be buried with you. All of you, die." A violent and chaotic divine sense emanated from the fiend god's body. Accompanied by a deafening roar, a 10,000 miles tall fiend god that looked exactly the same as the fallen fiend god, but much smaller in size, flew out of the fiend god's body. In a flash, it transformed into a black bolt of lightning and smashed toward Wuqi and his companions. Lu Bang murmured to himself in a low voice, "Give it a try, this is the heavenly bull that I've spent so much effort to make." Chapter 1079. Wuqi and the others stared blankly at the gigantic fiend god. He looked exactly the same as the fallen fiend god, and anyone could guess that he was somehow related to the fiend god. The aura emanating from his body was not inferior to any mighty figure at the pinnacle of the Tao integration pinnacle stage. In particular, his aura was so peculiar that the space enshrouded by his aura became as viscous as glue, and time abruptly slowed down by several times. This was clearly an extremely powerful innate ability. The fiend god only glanced at Wu Qi and the others from a distance. Wu Qi and the others who were Tao-breaking experts were fine, but Catfish, Lord Xiansheng, and the others who were Tao reasoning experts were shocked. Chi-Chi's body swayed, and his soul was almost sucked out of his body by the fiend god's bizarre gaze. The heaven-refining cauldron shook, and a beam of green light flew out, sucking the 8,000 undead soldiers into it. The 6 huge stars in the sky, arranged according to the 6 stars of the Southern Dipper, shook, and then 6 monstrous sword beams came whistling down, hacking right on the fiend god's head that was shaped like a longhorn bull. A blinding light burst out of the huge insect's head. The sword beams hacked down by the fiend slaying sword formation according to the 108,000 laws of heavenly Tao in the kaleidoscopic star core, and with the power of the infinite stars fell on the fiend god's head, but could not hurt him at all. Lu Bang could not help but burst into laughter when he saw that the fiend slaying sword formation did not hurt the fiend god at all. He nodded repeatedly and said, "Wonderful. This is the art of rebirth passed down by the Chaos Fiend God, combined with the mystic arts of the Forbidden Clans. It is indeed unpredictable and has the power to destroy the universe. Wu Qi, you little punk, you've hurt the army of the immortal divine kingdom today, and you'll all die here." Rolling his eyes, Lu Bang grinned at Princess Zhang-Lu and Yi Xia and said, "You two are so beautiful, so why are you following a bastard like Wu Qi? If I can unify the 3 realms in the future, I will appoint 9 empresses according to the position of the 9 palaces. I cannot count on the 2 empresses of the middle palace, but there is great hope for the other 8 empresses." While Lu Bang was bragging proudly, Princess Zhang-Lu and Yi Xia spat at the same time. Yi Xia made some gestures with her hands, sketching out a series of black, twisting runes that looked like earthworms. As Yi Xia's fingers continued to draw, streams of evil energy gradually spread out. Countless extremely thin, hair-like, 5-colored light patterns appeared around Yi Xia's body. Wu Qi watched Yi Xia's every move with rapt attention. Yi Xia's divine abilities and mystic techniques all came from the chaos, and some of them were so profound that even Wu Qi was far inferior to her. These 5-colored light patterns were so thin that they looked like they could be sprayed out at any time, but they gave off an extremely dangerous feeling. The huge celestial fiend slowly approached Wu Qi and his companions. His body did not seem to be very agile, and his muscles had not even stretched out yet. His movements were extremely stiff, like an old zombie that had been lying in a coffin for years without seeing the light of day. His every move was very dull. Another 6 rays of sword light fell from the sky. Although they couldn't destroy his body, they greatly hindered his movements. He was already immobile to begin with, but now, he was crawling like a snail toward Wu Qi and his companions. Lu Bang frowned. Ignoring Wu Qi and his companions, he just turned to Fan Kuai, who had just been rescued and was now applying ointment on his wounds with clenched teeth, and said, "They still haven't fully matured yet. It seems I'm still lacking. I can't let them leave this place alive today. Otherwise, if they tell the whole world what happened here, I'm afraid I'll be in big trouble." The ointment used by Fan Kuai was green like paste, but it was very effective. As soon as he applied it on his wounds, the wounds inflicted by Ao Buzan and his companions began to heal and scab over in just a few breaths of time. He gently exercised his arms and said in a cold voice, "Don't worry, Your Majesty, they can't leave this place alive. I'll be very careful this time and won't let them besiege us again." Lu Bang nodded slowly. He turned to look at Wu Qi and said with a frown, "How can they be so shameless? Their method of besieging us is even more despicable than me. TSK, there's actually such a wonderful man in the world. If he doesn't die today, he will be a good opponent for me." While the two of them were chatting happily, Yi Xia waved her little hand, sending out countless tiny threads of 5-colored light that shot towards the approaching celestial fiend. The 5-colored light threads wrapped around the celestial fiend, ignoring the chilly wind and evil energy that howled and roared around his body, and more than 90% of them sank into the celestial fiend's head. Suddenly, Lu Bang's body trembled, and blood dripped from his 7 apertures. He stared at Xia with shock and anger, then snapped, "Little girl, what a vicious trick. You can actually attack the Longhorn Bull's soul through the Grand Mist's supreme treasure, the myriad soul white bone bead? Bastard!" Xia's body swayed slightly, and 2 streams of 5-colored blood sprayed out from her straight nose. She shouted in a hoarse voice, "What a powerful celestial fiend. Not to mention the others, there's actually a pearl in his spiritual sea that's filled with evil energy protecting his soul." Xia tried her best, but she could only injure it. As for Lu Bang, he left a trace of his soul imprint in the celestial fiend's soul, and Xia only attacked it once, but failed to destroy it. Wu Qi pressed his palm on the top of Xia's head, injecting his own essence into Xia's body. Today, Xia had used 2 powerful secret techniques in a row, and her essence, qi, and spirit had been greatly depleted. If it weren't for Wu Qi replenishing her with his own essence, it would have been a great harm to her in the future, and also to the fetus in her womb. Not only was Xia pregnant, but so was Princess Xianglu. Wu Qi dared not to let them use too much strength, in case they hurt the babies in their wombs. Every single move made by Wu Qi and the other powerful beings in Pan Gu World was in accordance with the great Tao of Pan Gu World, and the babies in the wombs of Princess Xianglu and Xia couldn't be born simply by speeding up the time. These babies had to be born naturally in the time of the great Tao of Pan Gu World for a long time. This meant, even though Wu Qi made the time around Xia and Princess Xianglu go back to 1,000,000,000 years instantly with a secret magic, only 3 to 5 days had passed in the outside world. Therefore, the babies in their wombs had only been growing for 3 to 5 days. The babies were still in their wombs, but Xia risked her own spirit blood to fight against the enemies. This made Wu Qi sad and worried. Therefore, he could only try his best to compensate Xia with his own spirit blood. While sending his own essence power out, Wu Qi looked at this enormous devil god worriedly. The divine kingdom of the deathless, Lu Bang. Everything in this place was evil, which made Wu Qi feel uneasy. Wu Qi reckoned that if he gave it his all, he had a 60% chance of destroying Lu Bang's soul, and if all Lu Bang had shown was just the trump card he had shown. But if Lu Bang was hiding something else, if Wu Qi failed to kill Lu Bang with this strike, he would offend Lu Bang for no reason. Wu Qi wasn't afraid of Lu Bang alone, but Lu Bang had so many followers. Ordinary soldiers and civilians in the East Sea all lived in the small world inside Wu Qi's body. As long as Wu Qi didn't die, they wouldn't be harmed. But, Wu Qi had brought so many ministers and warriors out of the East Sea, and so many immortals and spirit creatures who followed him. They couldn't just hide in the small world and never see the light of day, could they? But they were no match for Lu Bang. Before Ao Buzan recovered all the strength he had in his previous life, he was no match for this devil. Wu Qi had revealed his whereabouts today. If he really offended Lu Bang, when Lu Bang escaped and returned with his people to take revenge, how many people around Wu Qi would be killed or injured? After hesitating for a moment, Wu Qi patted the heaven-refining cauldron on his head, and a clear light rolled the South Emperor out. Wu Qi grabbed the South Emperor's neck, looked at Lu Bang, and shouted, "Lu Bang, the South Emperor is here. Let's forget about what happened today, and I'll return the South Emperor to you. What do you think?" The South Emperor looked in shock at Lu Bang, who was sitting in the chariot in the distance. He did look like Lu Bang, but his aura, his temperament, and his arrogant, domineering, and majestic aura were not the child he was familiar with. Especially his aura, which was the aura of an upper-grade Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal. He was only at the peak of Primordial Unity Golden Immortal, so how could Lu Bang have the cultivation of a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal? And what was that huge streamer over Lu Bang's head? Why did the evil Qi make the South Emperor tremble with fear? In particular, the demon god hovering in mid-air was approaching. He looked so similar to the fallen demon god in the distance. The aura he gave off made the South Emperor's muscles tense up. Even his spiritual soul trembled involuntarily, like a rabbit that had seen its natural enemy. Judging from the situation, the devil seemed to be controlled by Liu Bang as well. What was going on? Just as the South Emperor was puzzled, Liu Bang suddenly burst into laughter. He laughed so hard that he rocked back and forth. Shaking his head, he sighed and said, "Wu Qi, are you out of your mind? Do you know the story of getting a share? He is just a father. Do I care about his life or death? It's up to you whether you want to chop this South Emperor or stew him. If you're willing, you can give me his skull. I can use it to make a wine vessel." The South Emperor's lips turned blue with anger. He stared at Liu Bang and snapped, "Unfilial son, how can you be so heartless?" Liu Bang twitched his lips and sneered, "Heartless? Unfilial son? Bah, Lao Tzu has been reincarnated countless times in the mortal world, and his father has changed countless times. It is your good fortune that he is willing to call you father. What else do you want?" Spitting a mouthful of saliva thousands of feet away, Liu Bang put on a hooligan posture, rolled up his sleeves, and shouted at the South Emperor, "South Emperor, Lao Tzu doesn't care about your life or death. Why don't you bite Lao Tzu's bird? Motherfucker, I only played with you, a palace maid, and you forced me to reincarnate in the mortal world to be a tool for you to control the mortal world. I didn't treat you as my father then." Tilting his lips and tilting his head, Liu Bang sneered, "After reincarnating so many times, I don't even know how many fathers Lao Tzu has had. Who the hell cares about you?" Fan Kuai grinned. The South Emperor was so angry that his eyes rolled back, and he almost fainted. When Wu Qi heard Liu Bang's wonderful speech, he heaved a long sigh and threw the South Emperor into the heaven-refining cauldron. Then, the cauldron sucked all the people around it into the cauldron, while Wu Qi himself transformed into a stream of light and sped away into the distance. In just a flash, Liu Bang could no longer find any trace of Wu Qi in his sight and divine sense. Liu Bang, who was cursing with his sleeves rolled up, was stunned. He looked back at Fan Kuai in horror, but the latter also looked confused. God? A ghost? How can he appear and disappear so mysteriously? Subconsciously, Liu Bang touched his arm, which was covered with goosebumps. He was stunned by Wu Qi's amazing escape technique. Chapter 1080. Liu Bang, Liu Bang. Wu Qi returned to Panga continent while wringing his wrists and sighing in admiration along the way. Now that he was here, he was not afraid that Liu Bang would have the guts to catch up with him. The most important thing for him to do was to keep a secret. If he dared to show up on Panga continent with an artificially made fiend celestial, those Dao-fusing experts who were constantly paying attention to all the movements on Panga continent with their divine sense would tear him apart. Princess Zhang and the others had returned to the top-secret place in the outer heavenly realm, where they continued to slaughter fiend celestials to accumulate virtues to refine the items of virtue. More than 10,000 items of virtue had been refined by now, and there was still a small number of the most powerful ones that had not received enough virtues. They would be completed in about half a year. The place was extremely well hidden. With the Wawang clan covering their tracks, the various formations Wu Qi had constructed, and the Mirror of Kunlun, an extraordinary artifact that could hide all the energy fluctuations, Wu Qi was not worried that someone could find it. Princess Zhang and the others were absolutely safe. Riding on nine tails and flying aimlessly over Panga continent, Wu Qi was like a headless fly, not knowing where to go. Going to Diyu? It did not make much sense. At this point, would Wu Qi still go to Diyu and be a loyal subject? Even if he dared to say that, Ying Zheng and the others had to be willing to believe him. Ever since he came to Panga continent, Wu Qi had behaved like a warlord who intended to set up a separatist regime. If he was willing to join Diyu, perhaps even Emperor Haozuan would not dare to use him. Now, his relationship with Diyu could only be said to be that of friends, or that he had a good personal relationship with some people in Diyu. As for other places, the Ling dynasty and the Shizo dynasty had been destroyed, so he didn't have the chance to become a state preceptor even if he wanted to. His clones were stirring up trouble in both New Wu and Great Wu, so there was no need for him to intervene. As for the celestial court, Wu Qi looked up at the sky. The 6 great celestial emperors of the celestial court were still imprisoned by him in the heaven refining cauldron. If he went to the celestial court now, forget it. People like him who joined the celestial court halfway wouldn't be put in an important position. Why bother coming? After thinking for a long time, he could not think of what he, the true self, should do. So, he could only ride on the 9-tailed carapace in boredom, flying feebly over great rivers and mountains. While flying, Wuqi had sensed a few faintly discernible divine wills, which had almost fused with the true form of the heavenly Tao, sweeping across his body. Wuqi knew in his heart that those words were coming. Before long, he saw a spot of golden light in front of him, and a faint scent of sandalwood wafted toward him. Clad in a kasaya of 7 treasures, with a Buddhist crown made of various pearls on his head, and his wrists, neck, waist, and feet glittering with light, Supremacy, who was wearing dozens of rare Buddhist treasures, was flying toward him on a cloud like a nouveau riche. Dozens of miles away, Supremacy cried out in a booming voice as if he had never seen Wuqi before, "Are you Wuqi, fellow Taoist? Please stop your cloud steps." He slapped the 9-tailed carapace hard on its head, causing it to spit out a mouthful of saliva and slow to a stop. Its 9 tails waved rapidly in the air, creating countless ghostly shadows that locked onto Supremacy. Wuqi sat lazily on the 9-tailed carapace, cupped his fist and bowed to Supremacy. "Supremacy, Supremacy. Ha, I've heard so much about you. You've been in the limelight these days." Supremacy ignored the covetous 9-tailed carapace, and slowly flew to within 1,000 feet of Wuqi. He cupped his fist and bowed to Wuqi. "Fellow Taoist Wuqi, it's my pleasure to meet you. Let's cut the crap and ask fellow Taoist to return the Vajra Muni and my fellow Buddhist brothers." Wuqi looked at Supremacy with great astonishment, shook his head and said, "Monk, are you crazy or stupid? Although you've become famous recently, Wuqi is not a nobody. Although the East Sea has been handed over to Diyu, Wuqi still has millions of soldiers and countless good generals under his command. You're asking Wuqi to return the Vajra Muni to you just like that? That's easy for you to say." Supremacy rolled his eyes and snorted coldly, waved his right palm and pressed it down on Wuqi's heart. Supremacy de used all his strength in this palm strike. A vigorous Buddhist light condensed into a lifelike golden lotus in the center of his palm. On the lotus's stamen sat a thumb-sized, white, and translucent Buddha Dharma idol. The tiny Dharma idol emitted a suffocating wave of Dharma power. Wuqi's expression turned serious. He took a deep breath, sucking in all the air and clouds around him. It was not just the air and clouds, even the light, space, time, and other objective existences were sucked into Wuqi's body. Even all the mountains that were over 10,000 feet tall vanished into thin air. They were all sucked into Wuqi's body. Everything was converted into the surging primordial violet aura. Wuqi looked at Supremacy's golden palm that was slowly coming down at his chest, then slowly pushed his palm up to meet it. Wuqi's right palm turned translucent like it was carved out of crystal, and a faint purple aura could be vaguely seen on the edge of his palm. The center of his palm was dented, looking soft like a ball of cotton, devoid of any strength. Supremacy's palm was a golden lotus that protected a small Buddha figure. It was firm and strong, filled with the supreme power of the Buddhist sect. Wuqi's palm force, on the other hand, was fleeting and weak. A strand of purple aura gradually appeared in his palm, forming an extremely simple Taiji Pisces diagram. The yin-yang Pisces rotated slowly, bringing with it a mysterious rhythm that could not be explained to others. It floated gently towards Supremacy's Buddha palm. On the Great Spirit Vulture Mountain, a few Buddhist ancestors praised in unison. Supremacy's palm strike had truly displayed the mighty, masculine power of the Buddhist sect to the fullest. In the primordial Tao Palace, the 9 Daozu exclaimed in unison. Wuqi did not come from a proper Tao sect, but his palm strike had displayed the charm of Tao sect almost perfectly. Supremacy was firm and fierce, while Wuqi was soft and ethereal. One hard and one gentle, they displayed almost all the secrets of Tao sect and Buddhist sect below the Tao fusing realm in front of everyone. It looked simple as the two of them slapping each other's palms like street thugs, but it contained endless mysteries. Those below the Tao-breaking realm could not even see what was so mysterious about their attack. However, in the eyes of the mighty figures above the Tao-breaking realm of Tao sect and Buddhist sect, Wuqi's ethereal and gentle palm strike had already annihilated everything, turning everything into chaos. Within the chaos, there was the yin and yang of Taiji. This was the highest realm of Tao sect's mystic arts. Supremacy's palm strike, on the other hand, was clean and neat. It was firm and fierce, without the slightest hesitation. It was naked like a newborn baby, hot like the sun rising from the east. It simply cut through all obstacles with its supreme power, returning the universe to a blue sky and white clouds. Wuqi's palm strike returned everything to chaos, filled with a deathly stillness and reincarnation intent. Supremacy's palm strike contained infinite vitality with the power of destruction, opening up a brand new world within the deathly stillness. The entanglement of life and death, the reincarnation of life and death, were two opposite extremes. Under the nervous gazes of countless mighty figures, the two's right palms collided lightly. The yin-yang twin fish of Taiji in Wuqi's palm disintegrated, and the Lotus Buddha statue in Supremacy's palm was annihilated. Two strange lights, one gold and one purple, shot out at the same time. After clashing for a while, they strangely fused into one. Wuqi's and Supremacy's palms suddenly separated, and a space of about 30 feet appeared between them. In the 30-foot round void, boundless splendor suddenly burst forth, and a beautiful world appeared between their palms. The world was undergoing an earth-shattering process of creation. Countless flowers, plants, and trees grew one after another, followed by the appearance of birds and beasts. Soon after, all kinds of human-like creatures were born naturally. Although the primordial immortals and Buddhas of the realm of Tao reasoning were still puzzled by such a marvelous scene, the intensity of the divine sense that was paying close attention to this side in the void had suddenly increased by thousands of times, and a few of them could not wait to spread toward the light ball. Wuqi and Supremacy had exerted all their strength, but their attacks were of completely different natures. In the 30-foot round void, a scene similar to the creation of heaven and earth by the great Saint Pangu was played out. In one breath, Wuqi sucked in everything within 1,000,000 miles, and then the tremendous power of the two collided with each other, creating a small world in the chaos. It was the first time even for the Tao fusing experts to see such a mysterious thing. If those Tao fusing experts were to go to the chaotic world, they would also be qualified to create their own world. But unlike the great Saint Pangu, who disintegrated his own body to create a world, they did not have the miraculous effect of constantly absorbing chaotic spiritual energy to strengthen themselves like the Pangu world. If they could not gradually strengthen themselves, then what was the difference between them and the interstitial world or the Buddhist kingdom in the palm of their hands? Therefore, although they understood some of the principles of the creation of heaven and earth, no one had really tried it. The full-force attack of Wuqi and Great E Supremacy had perfectly played out the scene similar to the creation of the world by the great Saint Pangu. It was a small world about 30 feet in size, but it was filled with the essence of the heavenly Tao of an entire world. If they could obtain some benefits from it, it would be extremely beneficial even for those Tao fusing experts. However, just as the divine senses approached the 30-foot small world, Wuqi and Supremacy exchanged a glance. Then, with great tacit understanding, they clenched their palms and sucked. The 30-foot small world split into two and obediently entered their bodies. All the secrets were shared by them, and no one else could take advantage of it. A simple attack was so earth-shattering. Wuqi and Supremacy bowed to each other hypocritically, putting on a disgusting expression of heroes appreciating each other. Supremacy De put his palms together and bowed to Wuqi. Fellow Taoist, this humble monk is ashamed. Wuqi also bowed to Supremacy De. You flatter me, you flatter me. In the Buddhist sect, apart from the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, you are the most powerful. That may be the case, but a favor is a favor, and a business is a business. Do you understand, master? As he bowed with a smile, Wuqi took out the diamond muni and played with it in his palm smugly. Supremacy De put his palms together and looked up at the sky, vaguely having the realization of a martyr. Wu Qi smiled brightly. Holding the diamond muni with both hands, he almost drooled. How ruthless must this slash be? Look at Supremacy De's size, why is he a fat sheep? Chapter 1081. 9 divine wills hovered in the void, as hot as the sun as they circled around Wu Qi and Supremacy with undisguised curiosity. Even an idiot could tell that they were the divine wills of the 9 Daozu. They knew that Wu Qi had the lives of 6 revered Buddhas, 36 ancient Buddhas, 36 Buddhas, countless bodhisattvas and arhats, and even attendant Golden Mist, one of the attendants of the 7 Buddhas, who claimed to be the strongest divine ability of the Buddhist League. There was no doubt that Supremacy had come to negotiate with Wu Qi to redeem Wu Qi. The reason why the 9 Daozu had intentionally exposed their divine wills in front of everyone was that they wanted to tell the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, "We know about your shameful deeds, we have seen them, and we are watching you Buddhist League lose face. If you 7 bald donkeys have the guts, come and bite us." The divine wills of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs had long since disappeared. No matter how thick-skinned they were, the fact that Supremacy and Wu Qi were openly discussing a deal to redeem the sacred beings of the Buddhist League in broad daylight still made them feel a little embarrassed. Now that the 9 Daozu had put on a posture of watching the show, the Buddhist patriarchs should have run as far away as they could. Were they going to stay here and lose face as much as they wanted? In addition to the divine wills of the 9 Daozu, there were a dozen more divine wills lingering in the void. Clearly, the Huang clan, Great Horns, and the others were very curious about the sky-high price Wu Qi could fetch, and they were even more curious about whether Supremacy, an elite of the Buddhist League who had suddenly emerged, was also as good at talking as he was at fighting. When Wu Qi and Supremacy collided head-on just now, they actually produced a strange scene that could only be seen during the creation of heaven and earth, which surprised the Huang clan and the 18 Dao fusing experts of the Holy Alliance. With such strength, it proved that Wu Qi and Supremacy De had stepped into the doorstep of the Dao integration realm. As long as they were willing, they could merge with the heavenly Dao at any time. Putting aside Wu Qi, who owed the Huang clan many favors and had a good relationship with the Empress Hua Palace, De Venerable had a profound cultivation base and was also the spokesperson chosen by the Buddhist sect for this stage. If his eloquence was as good as his supernatural powers, then the Buddhist sect would have an extraordinary figure. On the contrary, if a De Venerable's strength lay in his fists, and his tongue was not as flexible as his fists, then he was much less of a threat to others. A Grand Venerable who only knew how to use his fists to hit others was nothing more than a powerful fighter. His existence was not worth considering. Wu Qi and De Venerable stood face to face under the watchful eyes of over 20 Dao integration realm cultivators. Ninetails waved his long tail excitedly, spitting saliva at De Venerable from time to time, putting on a ferocious expression that said, "I'm very interested in your flesh." The saliva of the 9 tails was so abundant that in just a quarter of an hour, a small pool of water had been stirred up on the ground. Within 1,000 miles of the pool, not even a blade of grass grew. All living creatures were killed by the powerful poison contained in the saliva of the 9 tails. A Buddhist chant suddenly sounded. De Venerable gestured with his fingers and said, "One world venerable, 1 primordial treasure, 1 ancient Buddha, 2 chaos spirit treasures, 1 Buddha, 1 chaos spirit treasure, and 1 bodhisattva, 1 connate spirit treasure. How about those arhats, heavenly kings, adamantine, and the like as extras? At most, we can redeem them with immortal stones and spirit stones. The Buddhist sect is poor, so don't even think about taking advantage of us." Wu Qi snorted coldly, then pointed his finger at Supremacy and scolded, "The Buddhist League is poor? How dare a bald donkey like you say something like that? Look at yourself, TSK, 18 primordial treasures. You alone have more than 10 times the net worth of me and everyone around me combined. Cut the crap, I'll pay you 10 times the original price. Do as you see fit. Those arhats, heavenly kings, and adamantine aren't worth much. Pay the bodhisattvas and Buddhas, and I won't take a single immortal stone from you for the rest." After a brief pause, Wuqi toyed with the Vajramuni and said with a smile, and that attendant golden mist, he's said to be the most powerful in the Buddhist sect and the personal attendant of the Buddha. His value cannot be measured by his cultivation base. At the very least, he's worth as much as the two world venerables. De Venerable smacked his lips and rubbed his sleeves. With a wry smile, he said, your price is too ridiculous. Even if the Buddhist sect has some savings, it's still. Zimei Daozu's airy voice came from the void. My little friend Wuqi, the Buddhist sect has a deep foundation. I've seen it with my own eyes. Back in the days when the Three Swallow Mountain, Purple Smoke Valley, and White Bone Abyss fought in the chaos space, hundreds of thousands of chaos fiend gods fell, and those 7 old bald thieves got no less than 100 primordial treasures. As for the other treasures, they have thousands of them. Don't be fooled by this little bald thief's lies. As soon as Zimei Daozu finished, Buddha Guarding Heart's exasperated voice came from the void. Zimei, you're so lazy. How can you do such a thing with your status? You. Do you still have the face to see the world? Zimei laughed lightly. How can I not have the face to see the world? I'm not like some misers who don't care about the life and death of their disciples but care about worldly possessions. Alas, those primordial treasures are indeed powerful, but what use do they have if no one drives them? My fellow Taoists, you've cultivated for countless years, and the Buddhist sect pays more attention to the cultivation of one's mind. Can't you see through this? Wuqi clapped his hands and laughed. He cheered loudly, saying that Zimei Daozu's words were very reasonable. Wuqi played with the Vajramuni in his hand excitedly and declared to the almighty beings who were watching him, since Zimei Daozu had testified that the Buddhist sect was so rich, Wuqi would not disappoint Zimei Daozu's righteous heart. He strongly demanded that Zimei raise the price de Venerable mentioned to 20 times. 20 times. Every revered one had to exchange 20 supreme treasures of primordial. Sitting in Empress Hua's palace, the Wahuang clan's eyebrows were raised, startled by Wuqi's exorbitant demand. The Wahuang clan had some savings. Being able to survive from the primordial chaotic world to the present, the Wahuang clan was quite wealthy. Although they were not as wealthy as the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs, they still had about a dozen supreme treasures of primordial. But of the price Wuqi had offered, all the Wahuang clan's wealth was not enough to exchange for an revered one who had been captured alive by Wuqi. Wasn't this too much of a blow? As for Great Horns and his companions, although they knew Wuqi's background and were friends with Wuqi, when they heard Wuqi call out the price 20 times, they suddenly had the idea of robbing Wuqi. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs were so angry that their noses went crooked. It was supposed to be a perfectly good thing. With De Venerable's offer, the Buddhist League would put some pressure on Wuqi and let Wuqi go on the condition that he would let bygones be bygones. In that case, they might be able to get those captured disciples and disciples back at a very low price. But, when Zimei Daozu intervened, and Wuqi called out such a terrible price, even though the 7 Buddhist patriarchs were very wealthy, they felt a sharp pain in their hearts. 20 supreme treasures of primordial for one revered one. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs were really in the mood to let the 6 useless revered one die. Even if the Shizo dynasty collapsed, and Emperor Wugo and the other high-ranking members of the Shizo dynasty, and even a large number of Shizo dynasty armies were wiped out, it would only be a loss of some minor forces for the Buddhist League. It would not do any harm to the foundation of the Buddhist League. But, the price Wuqi had called out was no different from carving out a piece of flesh from the heart of the Buddhist League. Any supreme treasure of primordial, if used properly, would be a tremendous force that could even dominate a battle. If they really agreed to Wuqi's request, it would be a real heartache. Before the 7 Buddhist patriarchs could say anything, Wuqi had already cried out, well, cut the crap. As the saying goes, good fortune is hard to part with. When the disciples of the Buddhist League were receiving alms from others, the door was wide open, but when it came to saving their own disciples, the door was tightly closed. After a while of ridicule, Wuqi burst out laughing and said, then, may I ask the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, what is the value of your disciples? How about, for the sake of the 7 Buddhas, 6 revered venerables who are loyal to Buddhism, 36 ancient Buddhas who are loyal to Buddhism, 36 Buddhas who are loyal to Buddhism, 36 Buddhas who are loyal to Buddhism, countless bodhisattvas, arhats, vajras, and heavenly kings who are loyal to Buddhism, and a servant of gold mist who is loyal to Buddhism, give me a copper coin, and I'll return him to you. How about that? 1 copper coin. The 9 Daozu laughed in unison, their laughter spreading across the entire Panga continent. They thought Wu Qi was too interesting. If Wu Qi had not obstructed the Ling dynasty and was not a friend of the Dao League, they would have recruited Wu Qi into the Dao League. How could he dare to offer such a price to the 7 Buddhist ancestors for a single copper coin? The Buddhist patriarchs were so angry that they could not say a word for a long time. 1 copper coin. Although Wu Qi dared to make such a price, they were too ashamed to do so. Unless they no longer wanted to stay in Panga World, unless they never wanted to see these old acquaintances of Panga World again. After a quarter of an hour, Buddha Guarding Will's voice rang out slowly, Daoi, according to Wu Qi's request, give him the price. Fellow Taoist Wu Qi, remember, from today on, you are the #1 enemy of the Buddhist League, and all the Buddhas in the world can kill you on sight. Wu Qi did not say a word, just looking at Daoi with a smile. Slowly, Dei Supremacy fished out a bag made of white cloth from under his sleeve and threw it over to Wu Qi. Just now, he sensed a subtle fluctuation of magic power coming from his sleeve. The bag was not in his sleeve, but had just been delivered to him by someone with a great magic power. He gave the bag a glance with his divine will, then nodded satisfyingly. The Buddhist League was indeed rich. All the primordial supreme treasures and chaos spirit treasures were handed to Wu Qi according to the price he requested. However, Wu Qi also knew that this price far exceeded the bottom line that Buddha Guarding Will had given to Daoi. He had indeed become a great enemy of the Buddhist League. But who cared? Wu Qi was not afraid of what the Buddhist patriarchs could do to him. In for a penny, in for a pound. In front of so many Dao integration stage cultivators, Wu Qi threw the diamond muni to Daoi and shouted, Daozu, some of your disciples are also in Wu Qi's hands. May I ask what price you are willing to pay for them? A green mist shot out from the top of his head. Apart from the South Dipper Emperor, the other 5 great celestial emperors spat out their eyes. The 9 Daozu cried out in shock, and the 7 Buddhist patriarchs suddenly burst into laughter. Chapter 1082. Once again, Wu Qi gained a complete victory. He had blocked the 7 Buddhist ancestors' way of retreat with his words, forcing them to redeem the many disciples Wu Qi had captured alive with an unimaginable amount of money. But in the blink of an eye, the retribution was right in front of him. When Wu Qi threw out 5 great celestial emperors, the 7 Buddhist ancestors gloated and helped Wu Qi provoke the 9 Daozu with words. In the end, not only did Wu Qi strip the 5-peak Dao reasoning realm great celestial emperors of their last immortal stone, each of them sold them to the 9 Daozu at a sky-high price that left Wu Qi speechless. Each celestial emperor made the 9 Daozu pay 10 supreme treasures of primordial. Of course, these 50 supreme treasures of primordial were all evil treasures that Daoist immortals couldn't use, just like the treasures given by the 7 Buddhist ancestors. Among them, there were very few treasures that focused on attack and defense, but they had all kinds of strange effects. For example, there was a supreme treasure of primordial called the blood brew pot. It looked like an ordinary wine pot, but as long as the blood essence of various living beings was put into it and fermented for a period of time, it could brew a blood-colored wine. The longer the fermentation time, the stronger the wine would be. This blood-colored wine was rich and mellow, and each drop could increase a cultivator's magic power by 1,000 years. However, with every drop of this blood wine, one's evil energy would grow by a fraction, and one's flesh would melt by a fraction. In the end, this blood brew pot could make one a supreme expert with boundless magic power, but at that time, the person would turn into a skeleton, a complete anomaly of the ghost Tao. All 50 supreme treasures of primordial were such evil things, and not a single one was ordinary. But, Wu Qi did not mind it. He had many demons and fiends under his command, and even if it was the evilest blood brew pot, he would have the best candidate to use it. Wu Cheng, aren't you said to be immortal? I'll let you drink the blood wine brewed by the blood brew pot all day long. Since you can't die, Wuqi could use it as a huge magic converter. When Wuchang's magic power reached a certain level, Wuqi would use the method in Scroll of Stealing to extract 90% of his magic power and turn it into his own. By then, the evil energy would have nothing to do with Wuqi. In any case, in Wuqi's hands, these evil supreme treasures of primordial could be used to their greatest effect, and there was no need to worry that they would gather dust in Wuqi's hands. Having been tricked by the 5 great celestial emperors thrown out by Wuqi, the 9 Daozu felt humiliated. Resentfully, they grabbed the 5 great celestial emperors and brought them back to the palace of Dao Origin. As for why Wuqi didn't hand over the South Emperor, the 9 Daozu pretended that they didn't know anything about the South Emperor. According to the Daozu's plan, since all 6 great celestial emperors were captured alive by Wuqi at the same time, the whereabouts of the South Emperor must be with Wuqi. When the God Conferment plan was completed and the Daozu could personally strike, they wouldn't be afraid that Wuqi could fly into the sky or escape underground. In short, the 9 Daozu were caught in a trap of their own making. They had dug a big pit for the Buddhas to jump into, and then Wuqi turned the tables on them. The Daozu, who were watching from the sidelines, were gently pulled by the Buddhas, and they had no choice but to jump into the pit they had dug with a bitter face. In the end, it was Wuqi who took advantage of the situation. With more than 100 evil supreme treasures of primordial, he proudly sat on the back of the 9-tailed beast and quickly escaped underground. The Daozu and the Buddhas seemed to want to leave a divine sense mark on Wuqi at the same time so that they could find him in the future. But when Wuqi escaped underground, the Huang clan suddenly laughed. She laughed at the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Dao patriarchs, and the embarrassed 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Dao patriarchs snorted sulkily and retracted their divine senses. They were too embarrassed to do anything to Wuqi. When Wuqi escaped underground, he heard the laughter of the Huang clan, and he could not help but sigh. Well, he owed her another favor. Shaking his head, Wuqi counted the huge harvest along the way, then drove the grumbling 9-tailed beast back to Great Wu's territory. Along the way, the 9-tailed beast complained to Wuqi about the disappearance of his delicious food with tears in his eyes and saliva splashing all over the place. When it came to emotions, the 9-tailed beast even burst into tears as he carried Wuqi forward, his tears corroding the rocks and soil along the way into poisonous black smoke. It had not been long since the 9-tailed beast broke out of his shell. Although he was born with tremendous strength, his temperament was no different from that of a child. Wuqi remembered that he had promised the 6 great celestial emperors to the 9-tailed beast as delicious food. It was true that he had broken his promise and failed to satisfy his appetite. After thinking about it carefully, Wuqi took out the South Emperor from the heaven refining cauldron, who looked unsightly. He smiled apologetically at the South Emperor, pulled out the heaven-pacifying sword, and slashed him 4 times in a row. The South Emperor howled miserably as his arms and legs were cut off by Wuqi and thrown into the 9-tailed beast's mouth. The 9-tailed beast squeaked with joy. He wagged his 9 long tails excitedly, narrowed his eyes, and chewed the South Emperor's limbs happily, crunching the bones and flesh. Although the South Emperor was not an immortal body cultivator, he was, after all, a primordial immortal. His body had been nourished by immortal energy for many years, and his flesh, tendons, and bones were much stronger than ordinary gold immortal artifacts. Only a ferocious creature like the 9-tailed beast could easily tear the South Emperor's body apart. If it were any other living being, how could they have such teeth? The South Emperor howled in pain, but Wuqi pressed his palm against his lower abdomen and sent a powerful force into his body, forcing blood to gush out of his broken limbs like a fountain. The purple gold blood condensed into fist-sized beads and rolled into the 9-tailed beast's mouth. The 9-tailed beast grew more and more excited. His whole body swayed as he carried Wuqi forward like a drunkard. After eating the South Emperor's limbs, devouring 90% of his blood essence, and torturing his cultivation base, Wuqi spared the South Emperor's life and came to Great Wu's territory. He reappeared on a lofty mountain, pondered for a moment, and then released all 8,000 undead soldiers from the cauldron, ordering them to hide behind rocks and ancient trees in various places. Although they did not have their own consciousness, the strength of the 8,000 undead soldiers was comparable to Tao reasoning realm primordial immortals and Buddhas. With them guarding him, Wu Qi really did not think he needed to be afraid of anything. He threw the South Emperor onto the grass beside him, took a deep breath, and blew a gust of breeze toward Chang'an, which was hundreds of miles away. The breeze carried Wu Qi's voice and drifted to the ears of Liu Bang, who was fidgeting restlessly in the imperial palace of Chang'an. Liu Bang, who was grumpily ordering the few palace maids around him to be dragged out and beaten to death, was taken aback. He ordered the ferocious guards to retreat, bowed his head in thought for a moment, and then flew alone toward Wu Qi on a cloud. Liu Bang's incarnation had only broken through to the realm of Tao reasoning with the help of the human emperor's aura, but he was, after all, of an extraordinary background and knew some brilliant immortal magic. His cloud was not only fast but also very quiet. So, apart from esteemed Shouzhua, who was stationed in Chang'an, he came to Wu Qi without alerting anyone. Naturally, esteemed Shouzhua would never interfere with Liu Bang's actions tonight. His mansion was shrouded in an auspicious cloud. He was refining the treasures given by the few Daozu, so he had no time to care about Liu Bang's private affairs. Seeing the South Emperor, who was struggling and roaring beside Wu Qi, Liu Bang's expression suddenly became relaxed. He smiled and took a few steps closer to Wu Qi, nodded, and said, "Has my friend Wu Qi chosen to pledge allegiance to me?" "Hey, since you sold the other 5 great celestial emperors to Daozu, I've had this guess." Wu Qi kicked the South Celestial Emperor in front of Liu Bang and said coolly, "Cut the crap. The South Celestial Emperor has seen your clone in the divine kingdom of Immortal, and he knows your background. If I return him to the Tao League, I'm afraid you won't be the human emperor anymore. Now, I'll hand the South Emperor over to you, and I only want a promise and an oath from you." Liu Bang's face turned green and black. He looked down at the South Emperor, who was about 10 feet away from him, and a fierce light suddenly flashed in his eyes. A clear cry rang out, and a thick black mist suddenly gushed out from the surface of the South Emperor's body. The sky-veiling flag of chaos floated above the South Emperor's body, firmly protecting him. 7 colorful clouds shot out from Liu Bang's sleeve, wrapped in 7 small bolts, and shot at the South Emperor's chest like lightning. Fortunately, the sky-veiling flag of chaos was activated first. The 7 bolts shot about 2 inches into the black mist before losing their strength, exploding into a few fist-sized balls of light and disappearing. The air was filled with a pungent stench. Clearly, the bolts were dipped in poison. When Wu Qi smelled the stench, he felt his vision go black and his mind go blank. The toxicity of the poison was so amazing that even Wu Qi, with his strong body, felt dizzy. If the South Emperor was hit by it, he would immediately die. The South Emperor roared furiously, "Vile spawn, do you really want to kill your father?" Wu Qi's finger burst with a bright light, silencing the South Emperor. Smiling, he nodded to Liu Bang and said, "Your Majesty, please consider it carefully. I never force people." At Wu Qi's words, the 8,000 soldiers of the undead army emerged from behind the rocks and ancient trees. They stared coldly at Liu Bang, and an enormous invisible pressure made Liu Bang's body stiffen in an instant. "I never force people," said Wu Qi coolly. "You have so many incarnations, so it's not a big deal to kill one of them, is it?" I'll kill Han Xian and the others in Chang'an, and then let Wu Tianming continue to be the Emperor of Great Wu. What do you think?" Liu Bang's eyes darted back and forth. After 10 minutes, he spread his hands with a wry smile and said, "You win. What promise do you want? What oath?" Shrugging his shoulders, Wu Qi crossed his arms over his chest and said with a smile, "In fact, both are the same thing." "Well, as long as your Majesty swears, the more vicious the better." "Well, your Majesty, all your subordinates, and everyone related to your Majesty must not take the initiative to frame me and all the people around me. This so-called frame-up includes all sorts of poisons, curses, spells, and all sorts of divine abilities and secret techniques, as well as all sorts of traps, calculations, schemes, and stratagems. They won't work. After a long speech of more than 1,000 words, Wu Qi told Lu Bang an extremely strict oath without any loopholes. Lu Bang's face turned blue with anger because of Wu Qi. Gritting his teeth, he glanced at the South Emperor, who was lying motionless on the ground, and then at Wu Qi. Finally, he raised his right hand and said, "If fellow Taoist Wu Qi can do one thing for me, what's the point of making such a vicious oath?" That gave Wu Qi pause. "What thing?" he asked reflexively. "Why should I do anything for you?" Lu Bang narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Well, I'll pay fellow Taoist Wu Qi a lot of money to do something for me. What do you think?" Wu Qi stared blankly at Lu Bang for a long time, then suddenly burst into laughter and nodded.